Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 126 Black Widow's Disaster Day. So it was you who threw me out just now. Black Widow wasn't too surprised to see George appear. What had just happened was clearly not a coincidence. George must have attacked her with some kind of ability, which was why she hadn't been able to climb over the wall the first time. Actually, being discovered wasn't a big deal. She had come in intending to talk to them, and if negotiations failed, she could resort to force. However, her original plan was to infiltrate and find out their background first, how many mutants were in the school, before negotiating. If you put it that way, then I guess I did it too. George nodded indifferently. He hadn't attacked Black Widow, he had simply forgotten to deactivate the magical barrier, causing her to bump into it. But in a way, he was the one who set up the magical barrier, so it wasn't wrong to say he did it. I wonder what brings you to our school so late, beautiful. What could I possibly do so late? Of course, I'm here to see you, the bad man who heartlessly abandoned me. Black Widow smiled and gave George a flirtatious wink. George immediately understood, so you want to be with me. I didn't expect you to fall in love with me at first sight at the base. Well then, I'll reluctantly agree. He then took off his coat. Black Widow raised an eyebrow. If you want, it's not impossible, but what you're wearing now isn't appropriate, especially here at the gate. Why don't we go to your room first and talk? No need for that. I'll make it suitable. George pointed at Black Widow. Transformation. Black Widow's specially made black bodysuit instantly transformed into black low-cut, semi-transparent lingerie. See, this suits me perfectly. Going back to my room isn't exciting enough. I prefer being at the gate. Before Black Widow could react to the transformation from combat suit to lingerie, George had already cast his second spell. Expelliarmus. The Widow's thorn flew from her wrist instantly, and she herself was forcefully thrown against the wall behind her. Oh, so you like lying by the wall? That doesn't seem so bad. George cast his third spell. Immediately behind her, a rope as thick as a finger appeared out of thin air, coiling around the Black Widow like a snake as she fell from the wall, binding her tightly and suspending her from a tree trunk beside the wall. Tisk tisk tisk, so you like playing like this? This is a bit perverted for me. But if you insist, I can accept it. Do you prefer the front or the back? George withdrew his right hand and walked up to Black Widow, who was suspended immobile. Admiring the alluring, fair skin before him, he chuckled and teased. Black Widow took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't keep up the act any longer. She replied calmly, "Mr. George, you should know who I am. I was just joking. I'm here on behalf of SHIELD to discuss something with you and to help you. If you're truly sincere in helping us, why this way? Shouldn't you come formally during the day?" George said, a mocking smile playing on his lips. Black Widow was momentarily speechless. She couldn't very well say she was just probing, and any excuse wouldn't be believed. Mr. George, my actions were indeed somewhat inappropriate, but our intentions are good. No need for explanations. Trespassing on school grounds, take a beating and accept the punishment first. If you're still sincere afterward, we can continue our discussion. George reached into his pocket and pulled out the enormous alloy-spiked club wand Tony had made for him. Black Widow shuddered at the sight of the club. Seriously, even with her enhanced physique, she couldn't withstand a blow from such a massive club. She was about to issue an order through her earpiece to the elite agents lying in wait outside to rescue her. She desperately wanted to avoid any physical conflict. Even if George offered to beat her up, she'd accept it if he calmed down and agreed to talk things over. After all, she'd been discovered infiltrating to gather intelligence. But this was a matter of life and death, and she couldn't tolerate it. Oh, sorry, wrong one. George shoved the spiked club back in and pulled out a thick alloy rod, about the thickness of a thumb. Seeing it was just a thumb-thick rod, Black Widow abandoned her plan to call for help. Go! George used magnetism to control the stick, whipping Black Widow's shapely buttocks as she was suspended by her ropes. The pain was so intense that even a top agent like Black Widow was sweating profusely. "Alright, Mr. George, can you put me down now and we can talk?" Black Widow gritted her teeth, enduring the pain in her buttocks, and glared at George. "Since you insist on talking, then let's talk." Seeing this, George waved his hand, and the ropes disappeared. Black Widow's sexy lingerie returned to her black, tight-fitting combat suit, except her buttocks were noticeably swollen. Freed from the ropes, Black Widow fell from mid-air, instinctively trying to adjust her posture for a landing, but the pain in her buttocks caused her to lose her balance and almost fall flat on her face. "Tell me, what exactly does SHIELD mean?" Black Widow explained, clutching her swollen buttocks. "Mr. George, you should have learned about SHIELD when you were with Ms. Potts. We are an agency responsible for the security of the entire planet, recognized by governments around the world. Are you threatening me?" George raised an eyebrow, and Black Widow immediately waved her hand. "You misunderstand, it's not a threat, just telling you about her capabilities. We can get the CIA to stop the manhunt for Professor X and find the best doctors to treat his condition. We can also get the mutant children in your school adopted by normal families, educated like normal children, and living normal lives, instead of being confined here forever. You need to know that mutants have always been an extremely unstable factor for the government, and no one but us can help you achieve this." "Sounds good." George's face remained expressionless. "But there must be conditions, right?" "The conditions are simple. First, all the adopted children must be under our surveillance, for their safety. Second, Professor X's situation is special. There is still a risk here at the school, and there is a possibility of an outbreak that could harm ordinary people. We hope to transfer him to our dedicated base for treatment. Finally, SHIELD sincerely invites you and Wolverine to join the Avengers." Black Widow continued patiently, rubbing her backside. Chapter 127. You're the ones who have no choice. "I understand the previous part, but what is the Avengers plan?" George asked, feigning confusion. Black Widow shook her head. "I can't tell you the specific plan, but joining it will allow you to become a hero of humanity, somewhat similar to the X-Men, which I believe aligns with your ideals. That's all? Is there anything else?" George didn't delve further into the Avengers plan. Black Widow calmly advised, "That's all. If you agree, you won't have to live a life on the run anymore. Otherwise, with your superpowers, no government in any country will feel at ease. They'll keep hunting you down, and you'll be constantly on the run, leading a group of children. I think that children also want to live normal lives, and you probably want to be like normal people too." She had thoroughly researched and analyzed the information on George, Professor X, Wolverine, and the mutant children during this time, knowing what kind of words would most easily move them. Based on her experience, George shouldn't refuse her. "Excuse me, I have no interest in the so-called Avengers, and the children don't want to be adopted. Please just don't bother us anymore." However, George's answer surprised her. "Mr. George, I hope you can. No need to consider, that's the answer." George raised his hand to interrupt her directly. After a moment of silence, Black Widow's expression turned serious. "Mr. George, you should know how unstable you mutants will become if you're not controlled. As an organization that protects the safety of the entire world, we can't sit idly by. Are you really going to take those children and make enemies of the whole world?" "What, threatening me? Don't you feel the sting anymore?" George wasn't angry at all. Instead, he teased Black Widow. "If you were really just a lab-made test subject, and Professor X hadn't recovered, with so many mutant children, he might actually agree to SHIELD's conditions. Unfortunately, he wasn't. He had enough power to refuse SHIELD, and he wasn't afraid of their threats." Oh, Black Widow twitched her lips upon hearing this. She had done many dangerous missions, and many times she had been on the verge of death, brushing shoulders with a Grim Reaper. But being spanked and teased like this was a first for her. "Since that's the case, Mr. George, then don't blame us for being impolite." At this point, the only option was to notify the prepared agents to forcibly subdue George and the others. Professor X was brain damaged and incapacitated. Wolverine seemed to have regained his youth, but they had prepared tranquilizer guns capable of numbing elephants. A single hit would render him incapacitated. The children were still young and easily controlled. One mutant ability suppressor per person wouldn't be a problem. The most troublesome would likely be George, possessing multiple mutant abilities and the ability to fly, making him difficult to capture. But once the others were captured, George would likely have no choice but to surrender. Begin the operation. With Black Widow's command, there was silence in her earpiece, causing her to shudder. If you're waiting for those agents in the grove across the street, you're probably out of luck. George's sarcastic words rang in her ears. Did you do this? Black Widow's body stiffened. George shook his index finger. It wasn't me, it was our school's lovely students. Don't underestimate them. As George finished speaking, the school gates opened. And led by Professor X and Wolverine, the students dragged in one by one, elite SHIELD agents. Some were tightly bound in green grass, some were foaming at the mouth from being electrocuted, and some were unconscious with large bumps on their foreheads. None of them were dead, but none of them were capable of resisting. How could this be? Seeing her agents lying in ambush outside completely wiped out, Black Widow felt a chill in her heart, and when she saw the younger version of Professor X, her pupils shrank even more. What happened? Was it a clone of Professor X, or had he been cured of his illness and regained his youth through some method? If it was the former, that wouldn't be a big deal, but if it was the latter, that would be troublesome. The strength of a level 4 mutant like Professor X was quite terrifying. Headmaster, our mission is complete. The two professors didn't even have to lift a finger. We took them down together. Rico and the little wolf girl, the leaders, stepped forward to claim their credit. George nodded with satisfaction. Well done. Go back and find out which amusement park you want to go to. In a few days, the two professors will take you there. He had initially saved these children for their abilities, but it was mostly out of his conscience. But now it seemed that with a few years of proper training, they might actually become a decent team of superpowered individuals. Perhaps they couldn't handle enemies like Thanos, but dealing with organizations like SHIELD and Hydra on Earth seemed like a piece of cake. The mutant children that Sandel Rice conceived using Mexican women as surrogates actually had no difference in potential from real mutants, far surpassing those fully defined clones. Moreover, when Sandel Rice selected mutant genes, because they were for use as weapons of war, he chose mutant genes that were beneficial for combat. There wouldn't be any trash mutant abilities like the Hedgehog Man, whose highest level only reached level 2. Most of them possessed level 3 or even top-tier level 3 mutant abilities. What do you want? Black Widow asked, her expression grave. George walked up to her. I should be asking SHIELD what they want. We just want to live peacefully here. You're the ones disturbing us. You should understand that when your mutant identities are exposed, it means you have no choice. It's just a matter of time. Even if you kill us all now, the outcome won't change. Black Widow continued to exert psychological pressure on George, hoping to change his mind. I won't kill you. Throw them all out. George reached out and lifted Black Widow's chin, then shook his head, instructing Wolverine to throw all the agents out the school gate. Tell your director, Nick Fury, to come here personally tomorrow at 2 p.m. I have something to discuss with him. It concerns the life or death of SHIELD. It's not us who have no choice, it's you. Zombie drift. Black Widow was also forcibly transported outside the school by George's magic. Actually, if I hadn't let you in, you wouldn't even be able to get in. Don't think of yourself as so powerful. Standing at the school gate, George waved his hand, and the magical barrier once again covered the entire school. Chapter 128 Shield exposed. Black Widow reached out and touched the barrier, only to find herself blocked. She couldn't help but chuckle. So he already knew about us. I'm going to get a scolding from the director when we get back. She used her communicator to call for backup from the branch's logistics department, evacuating all the wounded agents for treatment. She quickly dialed Director Nick Fury's hotline to report the situation. Meanwhile, at the school, Wolverine, seeing George had redone the magical barrier, lit a cigar and teased, George, that lady was clutching her butt the whole time. You guys weren't just here, Logan, the kids are still here. Don't talk nonsense, Professor X quickly interrupted him, glaring at him. Many of the children wore strange smiles, clearly understanding Wolverine's meaning. Alright, stop joking. It was just a little punishment, a warning shot. The real show is tomorrow. Everyone go back to sleep. George waved with a smile, signaling everyone to return to their dorms. Today is nothing, tomorrow's negotiations with Nick Fury are more important. If things go well, not only will they be free from harassment by SHIELD and Hydra for a long time to come, but they can also have the CIA's arrest warrant for Professor X lifted and reclaim his vast fortune. The next day, at 1:50 p.m., A black sedan pulled up in front of the mutant school. Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD, wearing an eye patch, Black Widow, whose backside had healed, and Hawkeye Barton carrying a bow and arrow, stepped out of the car. Has the Department of Science and Technology analyzed what this is? Nick Fury walked to the school gate and knocked on the transparent barrier. Black Widow quickly replied, they say it's a very strong force field. Once enveloped, ordinary firearms would probably have a hard time breaking through, but missiles shouldn't be a problem. It's a real shame. It would be great if they were willing to join the Avengers. Nick Fury couldn't help but sigh. He admired George, this mutant with various amazing superpowers. Welcome, Director of SHIELD, to our school. Come, sit down and have a cup of tea. Let's chat. The door opened instantly, the barrier disappeared, revealing George sitting on a stone bench, brewing tea. Tea? I didn't know you had this hobby. Nick Fury calmly led the three into the school and sat down on the stone bench opposite George. George waved his hand, causing the brewed tea to float to the surface and land in front of Nick Fury. I've watched a lot of TV since leaving the base, and I'm quite interested in this kind of drink. Doesn't the director like it? I prefer black tea to green tea, Nick Fury replied. That's easy. George pointed to the cup in front of Nick Fury. Flaw dimension, a transformation spell was activated, and the green tea in the cup instantly turned into black tea. Is this alright? If you don't like black tea, alcohol is fine too. George picked up his green tea, took a sip, and smiled. Nick Fury's expression changed slightly upon seeing this astonishing scene, then he chuckled, what's the point of you insisting on seeing me, claiming it concerns the life and death of SHIELD, you only brought two men in? Aren't you afraid I'll just kill you? George didn't answer immediately, but instead asked a question. Nick Fury laughed. Killing me wouldn't make a difference. Even if I were killed, a new director would take over. Whoever sits in my position. For the safety of the entire world, I won't let you go unchecked. Besides, SHIELD isn't as weak as you think. He pointed to the ceiling. If I need to, a missile can be precisely aimed here immediately. Can your force field withstand that? Even if it can stop one, can it stop a second, a third? George had already put him in a show of force upon entering, so he naturally couldn't show weakness. George laughed heartily. Director, you're joking. Why would I kill you? We're just a bunch of honest, law-abiding mutants. Just kidding. Don't take it seriously. Honest, law-abiding. Black Widow, standing behind Nick Fury, rolled her eyes. Of course I believe Mr. George, but those guys in the White House will have a harder time. So I hope you'll reconsider our proposal. Actually, you can think of this as a deal, a win-win deal. A deal? I invited you here today, Director, and there's actually a win-win deal involved. George remained unmoved. I hope you can lift the CIA's pursuit of Professor X, return his assets, stop sending people to interfere with our lives, and also help our school get new paperwork done, giving my students legal status. And I'll tell you a secret, Mr. George, are you joking with me again? What kind of secret could be worth such terms? Nick Fury's face showed a hint of amusement. George calmly poured himself another glass. What if this secret concerns the safety of the entire SHIELD, or even the entire world? What did you say? Nick Fury, seeing that George didn't seem to be joking, replied, if that's the case, then it's certainly worth the exchange, but I don't believe you have such a secret. George looked up at Nick Fury and uttered a secret that caused the expressions of the three people present to change drastically. After Red Skull disappeared, you thought Hydra was completely eradicated, so you launched Project Paperclip, recruiting Dr. Zola, a former Hydra scientist, into SHIELD. Unfortunately, you didn't expect that Zola would secretly develop Hydra within SHIELD, even converting most of the agents trained by your SHIELD Academy into Hydra agents. Many of your high-ranking officials are also Hydra agents. Therefore, SHIELD should now be called Snake Shield. And many of the missions you thought were to save the world and maintain world security were actually clearing obstacles for Hydra, achieving Hydra's desired goals. Tell me, is this secret worth the conditions I just proposed? How did you know all this? For the first time, Nick Fury's expression lost control, his composure vanished. Even when George threatened to kill him, he remained as calm as a rock. Those who attacked me, Calson, and Miss Potts last time were Hydra agents. The professor and I both have psychic abilities, we can modify and read memories. So, Finding this information shouldn't be too difficult, George calmly continued. If you don't believe me, you can investigate when you get back. I believe that if you look in this direction, you'll soon find some clues. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Black Widow's Hesitation. If what you said is true, then I will agree to all the conditions you just mentioned. Hearing George's confident tone, which didn't seem like he was lying, Nick Fury carefully recalled many details from the past few years. It's true what they say, you don't know until you think about it. Sometimes you really can't find things when you don't think about them at all, but if you look for loopholes with the answer in mind, then they're full of flaws. Although he hadn't gone back to verify it yet, Nick Fury was already 70% convinced of George's words. However, he was still unsure of the extent to which Hydra had infiltrated SHIELD, and how many agents he could trust. I naturally believe in the director's character, but I also hope it can be done quickly. After all, if I tell Hydra about this, I'm sure they will agree to all my conditions, George replied with a smile. 1 week I will get everything done. I hope Mr. George can forget all of this for the safety of the world. Nick Fury's expression changed again. He no longer wanted George and the others to join SHIELD, he only wanted them to stay in school. Then, he mustn't tell Hydra about today's conversation. Otherwise, if Hydra knows they've been exposed, they'll kill him first, putting him in a very passive position. Unless he can kill George and everyone in the school right now and keep the secret, which is impossible. Not only can George fly away, but there's also the immortal Wolverine and the terrifying Professor X, who may have regained his youth. If he can't kill them instantly, and George and the others side with Hydra, then his only chance is to call Captain Marvel back. To be honest, he already regrets sending Black Widow to investigate George. She got nothing and even got stabbed in the back. But thinking about it, if he hadn't done that, he doesn't know how long it would have taken him to find out about Hydra's infiltration of SHIELD, and he might have been betrayed by an agent he trusted someday. Of course. Compared to Hydra, which loves to destroy the world, I still prefer your SHIELD do a good job. Once you really take down Hydra, maybe I'll be willing to bring my students to join you. Actually, my refusal to join you is also due to the large number of Hydra agents within SHIELD. I hope you understand. George stood up, patted Nick Fury on the shoulder, his face full of sincerity. But in his heart, he was thinking, you little brats, serves you right for looking for trouble. Go play by yourselves. Given Hydra's infiltration of SHIELD, if Nick Fury went back to investigate, he would inevitably be detected by Hydra. After all, Nick Fury's most trusted former director was also a Hydra agent. Therefore, in the next few years, SHIELD would likely be entangled in a battle with Hydra and wouldn't have time to deal with him. And in a few years, he would surely be strong enough that he wouldn't need to care about SHIELD or Hydra anymore. Mr. George, I have urgent business to attend to, so I won't stay any longer. Natasha will handle the follow-up to the conditions you mentioned. She'll be fully responsible and will complete everything for you within a week. At this moment, Nick Fury was focused on returning to investigate Hydra and had no time to linger. After saying goodbye to George, he left with Natasha and Hawkeye. Take care, don't bother seeing us out, George waved. And after Nick Fury and Hawkeye left, he looked at Black Widow. Miss Natasha, I'm leaving the rest to you. I'll do my best. Here's my number, I'll contact you when it's done. Natasha's eyes were somewhat unfocused at this moment. After hearing George's words, she took a deep breath and replied. George's eyes darted around as he looked at her. Actually, I know some things about you. You joined SHIELD because you wanted to leave your past behind and atone for the sins you committed as a spy in the Red Room. But as you've seen, SHIELD has long been infiltrated by Hydra. The missions you've been doing might not have been about atonement, but rather deepening your sins. Your director is acting too selfishly and extremely. The existence of an organization like SHIELD isn't necessarily a good thing for the world. What do you mean by all this? Black Widow's body trembled slightly as she stared into George's eyes. To be honest, George's words had indeed touched her, because she had just begun to waver in her faith in SHIELD and in her faith in Nick Fury. George shrugged. It's simple. What I mean is that our school is currently short of teachers. If you don't mind, perhaps you could try a different lifestyle. Teach students at our school and live a peaceful life, instead of being a spy all day, carrying out dangerous missions around the world. Black Widow was an all-around spy. Besides possessing superhuman physical abilities, she was fluent in all the languages in all modes of transportation in the world, and was also a top-tier hacker. If you were to bring her into the school as a teacher, the students could learn many useful things, preventing them from being easily manipulated by agents and spies in the future. Besides, the school genuinely needs teachers. Wolverine can only teach history and martial arts, and it would be too much work for Professor X to teach all other subjects alone. Moreover, the number of students might increase in the future. Crucially, he wasn't afraid that Black Widow would pretend to agree and then become a spy at the school. He and Professor X were professionals in this area. Hearing George's answer, Black Widow was clearly very surprised. She hadn't expected George to invite her to be a teacher at the school, especially since she had just received a beating from him yesterday, and the effects were still fresh. However, to be honest, she was indeed tempted by the possibility of a different way of life. She thought she was constantly atoning for her sins, but she hadn't realized she had committed even more. Perhaps teaching students would bring her some peace of mind. I need to think about it. Even if I agree, it will have to wait until I've helped the director wipe out Hydra, Black Widow replied slowly after a full 5 minutes of silence. George wasn't surprised, simply smiling. It's alright, the school gates are always open for you. Besides, we don't have as many requirements as SHIELD here. Just focus on teaching the students, and you're free to do whatever you want. He knew Black Widow wouldn't agree so easily, but judging from her previous answer, she was clearly tempted, and agreeing was only a matter of time. Moreover, he had quite a few potential teachers in mind, such as Captain America, currently frozen in ice. With his tracking spell, intercepting Captain America before Nick Fury would be incredibly easy. Black Widow was just one of the options. Even if she didn't agree, it wouldn't matter much. Chapter 130 Hijacking Captain America. Avada Kedavra, George was practicing the killing curse on a fish in the tank. Under the guidance of the 16-year-old Voldemort's spirit, he had successfully learned the killing curse, the dark magic he most desired. However, spells like the 3 unforgivable curses were naturally not suitable for practice at Hogwarts. If the all-powerful Dumbledore discovered them, wouldn't that expose him? Normal dark magic, even if practiced at school, wouldn't be a big problem. But the 3 unforgivable curses were different. If these 3 spells were used on a person even once and discovered, he would be sent directly to Azkaban. So normally he practiced in the Marvel world, where no one would care about that, and he could practice however he wanted. The green magical light struck the trout, and the trout that had been swimming around instantly lost its life. It seems to have expelled the soul. Picking up the lifeless trout, George examined it carefully, secretly guessing in his heart. The killing curse, also known as the killing curse or death curse, normally kills even Dumbledore if it hits. Upon successful casting, a dazzling green light will shoot out, and the wand will tremble involuntarily due to the powerful magic, accompanied by a series of chaotic sounds, as if an unseen Grim Reaper is flying through the air. The victim dies instantly without leaving any scars. To resist the killing curse, one can only dodge quickly or use anything nearby to physically block it. Normal armor charms and patronus charms are ineffective. After this period of research and practice, George believes the killing curse is a spell specifically targeting the soul, and those afflicted are primarily affected because their souls have been attacked. Therefore, this spell is not only effective against normal people but also against souls and spiritual entities. Casting the killing curse generally requires 2 conditions: sufficiently powerful magic and a strong killing intent at the time of casting. Frequent casting of the killing curse can easily affect the caster's emotions, making them irritable, bloodthirsty, and even insane. After all, how could one not be affected if their mind is constantly filled with thoughts of killing? However, this didn't bother George much. Because of his powerful mental abilities, he could completely protect his mind from the killing curse's corruption when casting it. Of course, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't use the killing curse frequently. There are many ways to kill, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with a killing curse. But learning it was definitely necessary. The more methods a sorcerer had, the more easily he could deal with various types of enemies. After practicing the 3 unforgivable curses, George had just stepped out of the combat simulation room when he received a call from Black Widow. The CIA's warrant for Professor X has been dropped, all of Professor X's assets have been unfrozen and are usable, and the procedures at your school have been completed. Next, I will go to the school to process official identification for your students to facilitate their future lives. Great, thank you, but they went to the amusement park with the two professors today. Why don't you come over tomorrow? George replied. In just 3 days, things were almost done. It seemed Nick Fury was really afraid he would tell Hydra. No problem, I'll come over tomorrow morning. Black Widow had no objection. George suddenly remembered something and said, by the way, I might have another teacher tomorrow who needs your help with a new identity document. A new teacher? Okay, no problem. Black Widow's tone was questioning, but she didn't ask any further questions. After hanging up, he went to the basement where the X-Fighter was parked, where Isa was already waiting for him. Let's go. The X-Fighter took off stealthily and quickly flew towards the Arctic Ocean. At this moment, George, sitting in the fighter jet, also activated the tracking spell. Direction manifestation, Steve Rogers. 4 hours later, George stopped Isa. Okay, let's stop here for now. He jumped off the plane and landed on a large iceberg. According to the tracking spell, Captain America Steve Rogers should be frozen under this iceberg. Explosive strike. He pointed at the iceberg, and it was immediately blasted into a large crater by the explosive strike spell. Seeing that it worked, George began to continuously cast the explosive strike spell on the iceberg, since he wasn't afraid of running out of magic power. After a 20-minute barrage of blasting spells, a frozen plane finally appeared in George's sight. Shatter. With another wave of his hand, a slicing spell struck the plane, cutting a gap large enough for 2 people to pass through. He leaped inside and, looking into the cockpit, saw Captain America, frozen for over 60 years. Retrieving a box from his special dimension, enlarged by the unfailing stretch spell, he placed Captain America and his shield inside. George then spread his wings again and returned to the X-Force. Normally, a device enlarged by the unfailing stretch spell cannot carry another device enlarged by the same spell, creating a special conflict. Therefore, obtaining infinite space by stacking boxes is impossible. However, the special dimension George used, created by his special manipulation magic, could accommodate a box enlarged by the unfailing stretch spell. This is because the principles of the two spells are quite different. Although both are special magic, the unfailing stretch spell expands existing space, while spatial manipulation magic creates a separate, independent space. In this way, he essentially complemented the strengths and weaknesses of the two magic systems, gaining a space that could carry people and a large amount of items without worrying about equipment being stolen, and that could be used at any time. Therefore, by learning more magic from different worlds, many rules that were considered truths in one magical system can be broken by another, thus creating a complementary system. It was evening when the X-Fighter returned to the school, and Professor X and Wolverine had already returned from the amusement park with the children. Who is this guy? Wolverine asked curiously, looking at the Captain America that George was defrosting on the instrument. His clothes, his appearance, and his features, he looks so much like Captain America. Before George could answer, Professor X had already guessed the answer. Professor X was born in 1932, and when he was 12 or 13, Captain America was at his most active, and after Captain America's sacrifice, he was celebrated and promoted in various ways. So he recognized the frozen Captain America at a glance. That's Steve Rogers. Wolverine looked more closely and finally nodded. It really is this guy. Please vote for me at the end of the month. Chapter 131. My name is She-Amen. Wolverine was born in 1832, and during the 2 years Captain America was active, he was also serving as an American soldier in World War II. So naturally he knew him, but he didn't idolize him like ordinary people, and therefore didn't recognize him at first glance. When Captain America died, he was captured by the Japanese army and sent to a prisoner of war camp in Nagasaki. That's right, he is Captain America Steve Rogers, George explained with a smile. I've been thinking about whether our school should recruit a few more teachers, but ordinary people probably aren't suitable to teach our students. And we also need to pay attention to the character of the new teachers, so they don't corrupt the children. So I thought of him. He pointed to Captain America, whose ice on his body had almost completely melted. I thought that when Captain America fell into the Arctic Ocean and disappeared, with his body injected with a super serum, he might not necessarily have died, so I tried using my tracking ability. And I actually found him. His character is absolutely fine, And the key is that besides being proficient in various fighting techniques, he is also a top-notch tactical commander who can teach our students how to better coordinate in battle. So you want him to become a teacher at our school? But he might not be willing. Wolverine was not optimistic about George's idea. He thought Captain America was a government-made weapon, an obedient soldier who would immediately join the government upon waking and serve it. So why would he stay at the school as a teacher? George smiled upon hearing this. That's not necessarily true. Besides, we still have Professor X, don't we? He turned to Professor X in terms of persuasive skills. Professor X was definitely among the best in the world. Moreover, Captain America was not the same as what Wolverine said. Captain America wasn't blindly loyal to the government. If he were, he wouldn't have refused to sign the Sokovia Accords. He had his own unique ideals and was unwavering in them. His main reason for joining the military was to protect the weak and end wars, and now there was world peace. If SHIELD hadn't been founded by his lover Carter and friend Howard, and if Nick Fury hadn't used various moral blackmail tactics, Captain America might not have continued to work for SHIELD. For over 60 years, almost all his family and friends had died, and the world had changed drastically. This was a huge shock for Captain America. So, as long as the persuasive tactics are right, getting him to stay at the school as a teacher and teach these poor mutant children how to survive shouldn't be too difficult. I can only say I'll do my best. To be honest, I quite admired him when I was a kid. Professor X nodded. He was quite supportive of having Captain America teach at the school. If you have no objections, I have no objections either. I just happen to need a drinking buddy. I heard he can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. Wolverine shrugged, also agreeing. Although Professor X had obtained a clone's body, he had quit smoking and drinking, and George was completely abstinent, spending all his time in the combat simulation room, so he desperately needed a drinking buddy. Since you all have no objections, then I'll wake him up. Seeing that the ice on Captain America's body had completely melted and his bodily functions were rapidly recovering, George waved his hand and cast a resurrection charm. Quickly, resurrect. The resurrection charm is a spell that forcibly awakens someone, often used to break the effects of a stunning charm. Under the forced revival of the resurrection charm, Captain America immediately opened his eyes from his coma. Where is this? Captain America stared at the ceiling, muttering unconsciously. His last memory was of the plane crashing and being frozen in a glacier. Hello, Captain Steve, a friendly voice startled him awake. He instinctively rolled out of bed, grabbed his shield, and assumed a defensive stance. Looking at the three strangers in the room, he asked warily, "Who are you? Where is this place? Why am I here? This is a school, and we are the principal and teachers. As for why you're here, that's a long story. Don't be nervous, sit down and we'll talk," George reassured Captain America. However, Captain America was clearly more sensitive. He glanced at the equipment in the room, didn't believe George, and rushed towards the door. How could a school basement have such advanced equipment? He suspected this might be a secret Hydra base. Hey, buddy, I think you should calm down. Wolverine immediately blocked Captain America's path, and Captain America didn't hold back, throwing a punch. Wolverine, who had just taken a punch to the face, immediately retaliated by kicking Captain America back. Even though you're over 90, I'm 100 years older than you, and far less capable than you. Seeing Captain America raise his shield, Wolverine brandished his adamantium claws, intending to show Captain America his power. Expelliarmus. At this moment, George intervened. He first used the disarming charm to disarm Captain America, then a rope charm to bind him tightly. Immediately restrain him. You really are Hydra? Captain America, bound, gritted his teeth and glared at George and the others. In his view, only Hydra would possess such cyborgs and individuals with special abilities. Fine, I'll take you out to see for yourself. He greeted Professor X and Wolverine, then picked up Captain America, carried him to the school gate, spread his wings, and flew directly towards downtown New York City. Captain, look down. This is New York in 2010. You've been frozen for 65 years, New York. Captain America looked down at the New York that seemed somewhat similar to his own memories, yet so different. Looking at the skyscrapers, the bright lights, and the modern cars driving by, his expression gradually became blank. As a boy born in Brooklyn, New York, he knew New York all too well. After flying around the city, he was certain this was New York, just not the New York of 1945. Returning to the school, Captain America was completely lost. Professor, It's up to you. Releasing Captain America from his restraints and entrusting him to the professor's guidance, George went back to practice his magic. The next day, after a night of persuasion from Professor X, Captain America finally agreed to stay at the school as a teacher. At 9 o'clock, as agreed, Black Widow came to process the children's identification documents, but when she saw Captain America in civilian clothes, her expression immediately changed. "George, he looks like Captain America, Steve Rogers? That's all. He's our school's new teacher, She-Amen," George introduced without batting an eye. Chapter 132 The Magical Panda's Third Clone. She-Amen. Black Widow's large eyes showed a hint of doubt. "Yes, it's She-Amen." George's tone was very certain. Changing the name on Captain America's new identity document was to prevent him from being recognized when he went out, and to reduce trouble for the school. Otherwise, looking so much like Captain America and having the same name would inevitably arouse suspicion. This was also with Steve's consent. He also wanted to live under the new identity. "Hello, my name is She-Amen." Captain America extended his right hand to Black Widow. "Hello, Natasha." Black Widow looked at Captain America, still full of suspicion. If she had encountered someone who looked so much like Captain America outside, she probably wouldn't have suspected anything. But this person was at George's school, a new teacher, and, more importantly, didn't have any identification, which made her suspicious. "You can consider my suggestion when you have time. The school doors are always open to you." After taking photos and filling out the forms, George didn't forget to extend another invitation as he saw Black Widow off. Captain America's arrival brought a new teacher to the school, and that same evening, Professor X found George a new student. Jessica Campbell, 10 years old. On a trip to Disneyland, she and her younger brother argued in the back seat, distracting their father who was driving. Their car collided with a military vehicle loaded with radioactive chemicals. She was the only survivor, taken to the hospital, and remained in a coma for several months. When she awoke, she possessed superhuman strength and the ability to fly. She is now adopted by the Joneses and renamed Jessica Jones. "I've observed her for a few days and think she's a good fit for our school, Professor. If you think she's suitable, then admit her." Professor X had decades of experience recruiting mutant children, whether it was assessing the candidates or persuading parents to send their children to school. He was far more experienced than George. Therefore, he decided that the professor would handle student recruitment from now on, allowing him to focus more on studying and researching magic. Now that the professor's assets have been recovered, the government, SHIELD, and Hydra won't be causing trouble anytime soon, and the school has gained another capable and intelligent teacher. There's no need for him to do anything more. After discussing the admissions criteria and procedures with Professor X, George returned to his dormitory to prepare for sleep, as usual. He can now control 3 bodies simultaneously with remarkable ease, without any lag, thanks to his ever-growing mental strength. After showering and lying in bed, George had just closed his eyes when suddenly his body jolted, and that familiar splitting sensation returned. Clearly, he was about to split into a new clone. Sure enough, after the soul-tearing pain subsided, a new perspective appeared before him. At the same time, 6 years of monotonous and tedious memories flashed through his mind. Drinking milk, sleeping, eating bamboo, climbing trees, sunbathing, day after day, almost the same routine. Damn, last time it was a magical cat, this time it's a giant panda. Can't it be a human? At the Bronx Zoo in New York, George looked around and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Indeed, his split soul this time possessed the body of an adult giant panda who had died unexpectedly. This panda was located at the Bronx Zoo in New York. A giant panda it is, at least it has decent physical strength. Although giant pandas look cute and cuddly, they are not cats, but bears, ferocious beasts with astonishing bite force, once known as iron-eating beasts. A normal adult giant panda can weigh 300 to 400 pounds, with a bite force approaching 300 pounds, only slightly lower than lions and tigers, but with much sharper teeth, and a full-force slap can reach 3,200 pounds. Tiger, a giant panda once released into the wild, shattered the spine of a jackal with a single slap. Each of George's clones can share the physical strength bonus, so now, whether it's the Marvel Original, Harry Potter's World clone, or the Fairy Tale World clone, they all possess the power of a panda. And this new panda clone also gained the bloodline and magic power of the other bodies, as well as the strength bonus. Looks like I'll have to find Mary Jane to learn transformation magic, George thought to himself, waving his bare paw. A panda's body isn't very convenient for movement in the human world. Imagine if he escaped the zoo and appeared on the street, he'd probably be mobbed by onlookers immediately. Transformation magic exists in the fairy tale world, and Mary Jane is very proficient in it, even able to partially transform her body, such as transforming her head into Happy's head. However, transformation magic only changes appearance, it doesn't grant the user the power of a particular beast. That's not transformation magic, but rather absorption magic. For example, the guild's muscular elfman is skilled in absorption magic, able to absorb defeated beasts and monsters, transforming into the corresponding beast or monster to fight. Let's get out of here first. After adjusting to his new clone, he stood upright in front of the iron door of the room where he was imprisoned, then waved his bare paw and began casting a spell, Errato Open. Under the effect of the unlocking spell, the padlock in front of the iron door was easily opened. This panda clone in this world didn't have a wand yet, so he could only continue to cast spells using hand gestures. Pushing open the iron gate to his usual outdoor area, a magic circle flashed behind him, and a pair of snow-white wings appeared. With a flap of his wings, his body rapidly rose into the air and flew towards downtown New York City. This panda's memories were mostly of eating and sleeping, containing no valuable information. His most important task now was to figure out what kind of world this was. Since he had created a new clone, he believed it couldn't be an ordinary world. Based on his previous two clones' deductions, this world must possess special superhuman powers, and there was a high probability that magic existed. Therefore, he was going to explore downtown New York City to see if he could find any relevant clues. Bear. Panda, it's flying. At the same time, a young security guard patrolling the zoo, seeing George fly away from the panda enclosure, was so startled that he dropped his flashlight. After a while, he rubbed his eyes and muttered to himself, I must have taken too much recently and I'm hallucinating. How could a panda fly? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Soon after, looking at the empty rooms of the panda enclosure, he felt like the sky was falling. Chapter 133 The Apprentice World of a Magician. After flying for a while, he soon arrived at the most bustling part of Manhattan and landed on the roof of the tallest building. 4 huge metal eagle statues adorned the 4 corners of the roof. It was midnight, so his flight went unnoticed. It would have been much more inconvenient during the day. This world is also in 2010, George confirmed, looking at the advertisements playing on the electronic screens on the opposite wall and the times indicated on them. But location and time alone weren't enough to determine what kind of world this was. This won't do. I guess I'll have to go down and take a look. After flying around the area a few more times without any results, George decided to go down and find a computer to search for information online. As a panda, it wouldn't be appropriate to just openly enter a place like an internet cafe, so he planned to trespass and find a villa to borrow a computer. He quickly found a suitable target in the suburbs. He quietly landed on the balcony of a villa, used a lock-picking spell to open the door, and walked in without a care in the world. Having just used his telepathic abilities, he confirmed that only one person lived in this villa, and that the villa was quite large, with other villas nearby at a distance, making it difficult to be discovered. Oh my god, inside the villa's living room, a bald, middle-aged man was listening to music and drinking red wine when he saw George walk in from the balcony, his eyes widening in disbelief. What did he see? He saw a panda walk into his living room from the balcony, and even walk in upright. If he hadn't been so self-disciplined, he would have thought he was on some kind of hallucinogenic drug. Out-of-body experience. Before he could recover from his shock, George had already cast the Imperious Curse on him with a gesture. George's current clone was simply unable to operate a computer, so to search for information online, he not only needed a house with a computer, but also someone to help him type. Struck by the Imperious Curse, the bald, middle-aged man's face immediately lit up with an incredibly happy smile. Go turn on the computer. George couldn't speak, so he commanded the bald, middle-aged man telepathically. The balding middle-aged man quickly got up and obediently walked from the living room to the bedroom, turning on the computer. Search for news related to magic. George followed closely into the bedroom, standing behind the balding man, and ordered him to begin searching for relevant information. Half an hour later, several unusual pieces of information caught his attention. Drakestone, the world's greatest magician, claims to be the inheritor of ancient black magic, Winner of the 2009 Best Magician Award, clicking on a magic video performance by Drakestone. After watching a few tricks, George's eyes lit up. Finally found a clue. He was certain that what Drakestone was performing wasn't normal magic, but magic itself, using magic to perform magic tricks. No wonder he could become a world-renowned magician at such a young age. Drakestone, why does that name sound familiar? A famous magician, no less. George sat on the edge of the bed in the bedroom, carefully recalling his memories from his past life. He enjoyed fantasy and science fiction movies, and he was certain he'd seen that name somewhere before, though perhaps in a supporting role, so he couldn't quite place it. After thinking for a full 20 minutes, he suddenly stood up excitedly. I remember now. This guy looks like the modern-day successor of the Morgana School from The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is a fantasy film about magic. It tells the story of 740 AD, an era when magic flourished. At that time, there were two major magical schools, the Merlin School, symbolizing justice and goodness, and the Morgana School, symbolizing evil and bloodshed. Morgana, the leader of the Morgana School, wanted to resurrect the souls of powerful sorcerers who had died years ago using a resurrection spell, creating an undead army to rule the world. Merlin, the leader of the Merlin School, launched a magical war to save the world and stop Morgana's plot. Merlin, who should have won, was killed due to the betrayal of one of his disciples, Hogwarts. Fortunately, at the critical moment, his other two disciples, Balthazar and Veronica, arrived in time. Veronica used her own body as a seal to temporarily imprison Morgana's soul. To protect his beloved Veronica from being possessed by Morgana, Balthazar used the nesting doll seal to seal them both inside a nesting doll. Before his death, Merlin entrusted his dragon ring to Balthazar, telling him that only by finding his reincarnation, the Supreme Merlin, could Morgana's soul be completely destroyed and Veronica saved. Thus began Balthazar's 1,000-year-long quest to find the reincarnation of Merlin. During this time, sorcerers sent by Morgana constantly attacked Balthazar, attempting to rescue her, but the powerful Balthazar defeated them all and sealed them inside the nesting dolls, including Hogwarts, Merlin's junior brother who betrayed him. Finally, in 2000, Balthazar found Merlin's reincarnation, David, but the 9-year-old David inadvertently released the sealed Hogwarts. After a fierce battle, Balthazar and Hogwarts were sealed together in a jar for 10 years. This magical world is wonderful, wonderful. George was excited after confirming his world. It wasn't because the magic in this world was particularly powerful. In terms of power, it couldn't compare to the fairy tale world, and in terms of wonder, it was about the same as the Harry Potter world. However, the wizards in this world possessed one thing that the other two worlds lacked: immortality. Wizards in this world could live forever as long as they weren't killed. Morgana, Balthazar, Veronica, and Hogwarts, they had all lived for over 1,000 years, their appearances unchanged. Even though the Philosopher's Stone in the Harry Potter world could create longevity potions, it had side effects. It couldn't stop aging, making them essentially living dead. In the fairy tale world, no wizard had ever lived for hundreds of years. Even a wizard of the 10th rank would only live for a little over 100 years before dying. Immortality, that was something he had always pursued. He had previously considered researching ghosts, hoping to live on as a ghost after death, but now it seemed unnecessary. Once he learns the magic of this world, he will no longer need to worry about death. Chapter 134 The Book of Morgana. Direction Manifestation. Balthazar, after calming down, George began casting a tracking spell. He needed to confirm whether Balthazar and Hogwarts were still sealed and whether the plot had progressed before deciding what to do next. No, the tracking spell failed. After casting the tracking spell, he found that the golden tracking mark hadn't appeared. Clearly, Balthazar was currently untrackable. Direction Manifestation. Hogwarts. He cast the tracking spell again, but it still failed. Looks like they're still sealed. If neither of them could be tracked, then the sealing magic was likely blocking the tracking. So, although it was already 2010, the plot hadn't progressed yet. Good, this gives me more room to maneuver. George pointed at the bald middle-aged man. Oblivion. He erased the bald middle-aged man's memories with an oblivion spell. After thinking for a moment, he cast a hair growth spell on the man's head. Rapid hair growth. Under the effect of the hair growth spell, the bald middle-aged man's head was no longer bald, but quickly sprouted thick, long hair. This was his small reward to the bald, middle-aged man. After releasing the Imperious Curse, George walked out of the living room to the balcony, spread his wings, and flew out of the villa. Only after George left did the bald, middle-aged man regain his composure. Huh? How did I end up in the bedroom? Looking at the open computer in front of him, the bald man was somewhat bewildered. He remembered being in the living room drinking red wine. Maybe I'm just too tired. Oh well, I'll take a shower and go to sleep. I have a big project to discuss tomorrow. He shut down the computer and went to the bathroom. When he saw the long hair on his head in the mirror, he was completely stunned. I actually have hair. His baldness, which couldn't be cured by ointments and medication, had actually grown hair on its own today, and so much of it. This must be a medical miracle. Meanwhile, George, flying in the air, cast the tracking charm again. Direction manifestation, Drakestone. This time the tracking charm didn't fail. A golden arrow appeared before his eyes. Since Balthazar and Horvitz were still sealed, he could find Drake first. Drake was the current successor of the Morgana school. At 15, his master was killed while trying to rescue Morgana from Balthazar, leaving Drake to live alone. However, for over a decade, he hadn't diligently studied magic, instead relying on the rudimentary skills he'd acquired to become a renowned magician, indulging in a life of luxury and extravagance. George sought him out for two reasons: the magic ring in Drake's possession and the Book of Morgana. In this world, magicians needed a medium to cast spells. Without one, it was difficult to perform magic. If he obtained Drake's magic ring, it should be able to replace a wand. The Book of Morgana, a spellbook containing all the magic of the Morgana school, was naturally not to be missed. As for whether he could defeat Drake, despite lacking a wand and relying solely on hand gestures, dealing with this half-baked Drake shouldn't be a problem. Besides, he wouldn't be foolish enough to engage in a direct magical duel. Following the golden arrow, he quickly found the building where Drake lived. Drake lived on the top floor of the building. The entire floor was his home. The lights were still on, indicating Drake was likely still awake. Peeking through the glass window, George saw Drake partying with 6 model-like women. I'll wait a bit longer, he thought. To be safe, George didn't rush and ambush him. Instead, he quietly landed on the roof, like a seasoned predator, patiently waiting for his prey's moment of weakness. At 3 in the morning, the lights in Drake's room finally went out. George returned to the glass window in the lobby, looking at the clothes scattered on the floor and the vanished figures. He quietly used the lockpicking charm to open the window and cautiously squeezed inside. Reaching the bedroom door, listening to the howling of 6 men inside, he prepared to cast a spell. With a loud release sound, George knew Drake had reached his most relaxed state. He then forcefully flung open the bedroom door, releasing a full-body binding charm. Petrify them all. The instant the spell was cast, his superpowers activated simultaneously. All the metal in the room rushed towards Drake, and the metal magic ring on his hand was forcibly stripped away. Giant transformation. After casting the body-binding charm, to prevent any accidents, giant transformation was also activated at the same time. His body rapidly enlarged, transforming into a giant panda with a head that could reach the ceiling. However, his caution was clearly unnecessary. Because Drake, who had just cast the spell, didn't even have time to react before being hit by George's body-binding charm without any defense, and was immediately petrified. The metal magic ring on his hand, which he had used to cast the spell, was also instantly taken back by George's superpowers. So the whole process was exceptionally simple. Thinking about it, Drake was originally a third-rate magician, and he spent all his time indulging in women. Where would he have much time to study magic? Not to mention that he had always lived in a peaceful environment, and probably didn't even have any experience fighting magicians. Otherwise, if it were an experienced magician, they would probably have noticed him as soon as he arrived nearby. Ah! What a huge panda! The 6 naked models on the bed screamed in unison when they saw the 4 or 5 meter tall giant panda. George burst into the bedroom, and then they were so frightened that they fainted. So weak, all my preparations were for nothing. Returning to his normal size, he slipped the metal magic ring onto his paw and tried to cast a spell on one of the female models. Stun. A blue magical ray shot out instantly, the power and speed of the spell feeling much better than his wand in the Harry Potter world, though not as good as his wand in the fairy tale world. After casting the sleeping charm and forgetfulness charm on the other 5 models in turn, he carried the bound Drake to the living room. Without dispelling the spells or asking any questions, George directly cast the legilimency charm on Drake to examine his memories. Found it, A big smile spread across his face as he returned to the bedroom and found a huge magic book, half a meter thick, in a specially made box under the bed. It was the Book of Morgana, containing all the magic of the Morgana school. Meanwhile, Drake, immobilized by George's body-binding charm, was utterly dumbfounded. He never imagined that one day, while making love with his girlfriends in his bedroom, he would be attacked by a magical panda, and not only that, the panda would steal his magic ring and spellbook. It was simply outrageous. Chapter 135 Druid Mage George. To kill or not to kill, having obtained the magic ring and spellbook, George returned to Drake, looking at the cold sweat beading on Drake's face, and hesitated. To be fair, Drake wasn't exactly a heinous criminal. Although he was the present-day successor of Morgana's sect, he hadn't used magic for any petty theft. He earned his living by performing magic. If Horvitz hadn't escaped to seal and found him, he wouldn't have gotten involved in the subsequent events. But if he were let go, although without the magic ring, Drake wouldn't be able to help Horvitz later. His magical power could be drained by Horvitz to unseal Morgana. George naturally wouldn't allow that to happen. In the original story, the final reincarnation of Merlin, David only managed to kill Morgana by using scientific power combined with magic. If something went wrong, the consequences would be dire. Morgana and Merlin were mages of equal caliber. Morgana could defeat Balthazar in just a few moves. If she summoned the Legion of the Dead, she would be even less of a match, and he himself wasn't confident in his abilities. Therefore, his plan was to absolutely prevent Horvitz from releasing Morgana. Ideally, he should wait until he was strong enough to overwhelm her before releasing her, which would also allow him to extract the incantation for the resurrection spell. How could he possibly miss out on such high-level necromancy, the ability to resurrect all the legendary wizards who had died, and form an undead army for his own use? Boy, do you want to live or die? George released Derek's binding spell and controlled the kitchen knife, which flew out and was placed against Derek's neck. Derek immediately knelt on the ground. Lord Panda, don't kill me. I want to live. I want to live. If you want to live, agree to one condition, and I'll let you go back in a year at most, George continued telepathically. Drake nodded without hesitation. As long as you don't kill me, I'll agree to any condition, not just one, but 10, even 100. I'll give you all my possessions. He wasn't stupid. In his eyes, the magic ring, the spellbook, and all his wealth were just external things. He knew how to make the magic ring. He could easily recreate it in a year or two. He hadn't touched the Book of Morgana in a long time anyway, and the magic he had learned now was enough to make him one of the world's top magicians. As for wealth, that didn't matter either. He could always earn it back later. As long as he was alive, he could regain all of that in a few years. If he lost his life, he would lose everything. I don't want your possessions, but I will imprison you for a period of time, from a few months to a year. During this year, you must teach me all the magic you know in the Book of Morgana, and then I will release you. George randomly picked up a small box nearby and began casting a seamless stretch charm on it. The magical knowledge in the Book of Morgana is a completely new system, and learning it won't be easy for him. Although Drake is a novice, he still has some basic magical knowledge, which can help him get started quickly. After killing Horvitz and releasing him, there's no need to worry about his magic being used to unseal Morgana. I'll do whatever you say, I'll do whatever you say. Drake only wants to save his life right now, so he agrees to whatever George says. After all, in his eyes, George is a panda, not a human. If he dares to negotiate, he might get slapped to death on the spot. Seeing Drake so obedient, George is also very satisfied. He has Drake pack his clothes and food, makes a phone call to cancel all his travel plans for the next year, and then throws him into the box. After throwing the box into the newly opened dressing-up space, he doesn't immediately check the Book of Morgana, but instead casts the tracking spell again. Direction manifestation, David Stewart. As a golden arrow slowly appears, he spreads his wings and flies away again. It's still uncertain when Balthazar and Horvitz will break their seal. He needs to find the reincarnated Supreme Merlin first. Once he finds the reincarnated Supreme Merlin, Balthazar and Horvitz will inevitably come looking for him, no matter when they break their seal. Then he can use the opportunity to build a good relationship with Balthazar and see if he can learn the magic from the Book of Merlin. Drake is, after all, a novice. He's passable at teaching him the basics, but to truly learn the magic of this world, he needs a top-tier magician like Balthazar as his teacher. Following the arrow, George quickly found David fast asleep in an old, 6-story apartment building. Looks like he hasn't appeared yet. After a moment's thought, he used an unlocking charm to open the window, then quietly flew into the room and landed beside David's bed. After deciding on the story he would fabricate, he gently patted David's head. "Child, wake up, wake up." His telepathic message directly entered David's mind, waking him from his sleep. "Who's calling me?" David groggily opened his eyes, blinking when he saw the panda head above him. "Am I dreaming about a panda?" "No, I'm right in front of you." "You're not dreaming." George blinked too. After a 5-second pause, David opened his mouth to scream, but George silenced him with a simple silence spell. Once he calmed down a bit, he lifted the spell and said, "Don't be afraid, I mean no harm. I just need your help." "Help? What can I do for you?" "You got lost at the zoo. Do you need me to take you home?" David stammered, leaning against the wall. Pandas are cute. If this were at the zoo, he would definitely take many pictures, maybe even a photo with one. But if he suddenly woke up one day to find a talking panda at his bedside, it wouldn't be so cute, it would even be a little scary. "I don't need you to take me to the zoo, you know what a druid is." George pulled up a chair and explained, "Actually, I'm a magician. I turned into a panda because I practiced special druidic magic. I'm here to ask you to break the spell and become human again. I know about druids and games. But it's no use asking me. I don't know magic and can't help you become human again," David replied helplessly. If he hadn't witnessed that encounter 10 years ago, he definitely wouldn't have believed what George said. But 10 years ago, he had witnessed a battle between two magicians, so he didn't doubt George's words too much, but he was powerless to help. "You are the reincarnation of Merlin, the legendary sorcerer supreme. You can do it." George used his superpowers to make the Merlin dragon ring on the table float up, and then placed it in David's hand. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136 Longevity Meditation Method. What Merlin Reincarnation? What Sorcerer Supreme? I don't understand what you're talking about. David swallowed hard, reaching for the dragon ring he'd had for 10 years. Remembering the antique shop magician's words, he shook his head. He was doing well now and didn't want any further involvement with these so-called mysterious magicians. "Well, let me tell you a story. A very old magician told me this." George didn't care about David's answer. His goal was to find a reason to connect with David, stay by his side, and thus gain access to the great magician Balthazar. In 740 AD, so you have this dragon ring, which means Balthazar was searching for Merlin's reincarnation. No, I think you must be mistaken. It was just an accident." David still didn't believe he was Merlin's reincarnation. George shook his head. "It's no use denying it. Morgana's sorcerers will find you and kill you sooner or later. I can protect you, as long as you help me undo my current transformation and restore my human body after you become the Sorcerer Supreme." "Kill me? That shouldn't be necessary, right?" David's pupils couldn't help but shrink. He was only 19 years old and didn't want to die. "Yes, it's cruel. They'll tear your body apart piece by piece with magic, and they'll continuously burn your soul with demonic fire for 365 days, making you wish you were dead, until your soul dissipates." George kept scaring David until his body was trembling before asking, "What do you think of this deal? If you can really protect me, then if I become the Sorcerer Supreme in the future, I will definitely help you regain your human form." David nodded, then added, "But let's make it clear first, I may not be the reincarnation of Merlin as you say. Maybe you're mistaken, and you can't blame me then. Also, if you stay here, you'll have to pay for your own food. I can't afford to support a panda, of course, then you can continue sleeping. I won't disturb you." George the panda smiled faintly, then got up and left the small bedroom, going to the living room. He plopped down on the sofa, took out the thick book of Morgana, and began to slowly read it. Meanwhile, David, seeing George leave, lay back down on the bed, but he couldn't fall asleep again. For him, everything he had just experienced was even more surreal than what he had gone through in the antique shop 10 years ago. He needed to sort out his thoughts. The magicians in this world actually have clear levels. In the living room, George flipped through the introduction to some basic magical knowledge in Morgana's book, only to discover that there were actually 1,000 levels of magicians in this world. A beginner magician starts at level 1, and by constantly meditating and accumulating magical power, and improving their understanding of magic, they can continuously level up. Once they exceed level 500, they basically no longer die of old age. Currently, there are two known highest-level magicians, Morgana and Merlin, both at level 1000. As he continued to flip through the magical knowledge of this world recorded in the magic book, dawn gradually broke. Around 6 o'clock, David, with dark circles under his eyes, came out of the bedroom. "Good morning, David." "Good morning, Panda. You can call me George." "George, actually, I still think." Looking at George sitting on the sofa, David nervously began to speak, wanting to express the decision he had been pondering for 3 hours. After careful consideration, he still felt it was inconvenient to keep a panda at home, especially since he hadn't encountered any magicians chasing him in the 10 years he'd lived there, and perhaps he never would. He was just a little worried about angering the panda and facing retaliation. "Oh, just a moment." Having already seen through David's thoughts, George waved a bare paw with one hand, casting a cooking spell. The kitchen immediately began to clang and clatter. In less than a minute, a delicious-looking breakfast appeared on the table. Refreshed, then, with another wave of his hand, he cast a housekeeping spell, instantly transforming the somewhat messy apartment into a spotless one, as if professionally cleaned. Restored to original condition, finally, George pointed at the old and damaged refrigerator in the living room. Under the effect of a restoration spell, the refrigerator was not only completely repaired but also looked brand new. After doing all this, he asked David, "By the way, David, what were you trying to say?" "Nothing. I was just saying, wouldn't it be uncomfortable for you to sleep on the sofa? Should I buy you a new bed?" David looked at George with bright eyes. After that short while, he suddenly felt that leaving George here was definitely a good thing. If a magician attacked him in the future, George could protect him. If not, that was fine too. Where could he find a panda that could make him breakfast, do chores, and even fix appliances? Having a panda was great. "No need. I'll be spending most of my time in this box. You carry the box with you. If you encounter danger, just open the box and call me." George took the box containing Drake from his transformation space, opened it, and squeezed inside. David stared wide-eyed at the large George squeezing into the tiny box, which was less than the size of his palm. He picked up the box and looked at it incredulously. "Magic, it's so amazing." At this moment, his long-dormant yearning for magic seemed to slowly reawaken in his heart. After finishing breakfast, David put the box in his pocket and began his walk to his university. Meanwhile, George found Drake inside the box and asked him to help him learn the magical knowledge and principles of this world. A week passed quickly. David hadn't been attacked by Hogwarts, and Balthazar hadn't come looking for him, indicating that the two were still entangled in the seal. However, after spending the week together, his relationship with David had improved considerably, and he had gained a basic understanding of the Morgana school of magic. He had learned the meditation method used by the mages of this world to increase their magic power level, and he had also learned the Morgana ring. Rise. Inside the box, George suddenly opened his eyes, immediately surrounded by red flames. Then, his hands moved rapidly, and rings with special runes began to appear around him, eventually forming a special circular magic circle. This magic circle was the Morgana ring. As long as a mage stood within the Morgana ring, the efficiency of meditation, learning, and practicing spells would be greatly enhanced. Chapter 137 Mimicry Magic. On the 10th day since George's new doppelganger appeared, his panda doppelganger was learning mimicry magic from Drake in the box. This was Drake's forte, the magic that made him a world-class magician. To be honest, after a simple introduction, George felt that this magic was similar to the transfiguration spell in some ways. One aspect of the transfiguration spell is the ability to transform inanimate objects into living beings, such as Professor McGonagall's frequent transformation of tables into pigs. However, the transformed beings usually possess the thought processes of the corresponding creature, making them largely uncontrollable by wizards. Aside from a few independent spells that extend from the transfiguration spell, such as Malfoy's snake summoning spell and Hermione's bird summoning spell, these can be used to command and assist in battle after being created. Mimicry magic has a similar effect, but it mainly falls into two categories. The first is the ability to summon creatures from paintings directly into reality, transforming them into real beings to assist in battle, like summoning a tiger from a book to help you bite people. Of course, in the early stages, Summoning a chicken is already quite good. Drake often used this trick to perform the transformation into rabbit. The second aspect is the ability to mimic and transform existing sculptures into living, special creatures, which can then be controlled in battle. For example, if you see a stone lion sculpture by the roadside, you can use mimicry magic to give it life, turning it into a real, moving stone lion to fight for you. If you mimic a stone bird, the stone bird can even fly. This is somewhat different from the enlightenment charm in the Harry Potter world, which brings a non-living object to life, but only brings it to life. Without additional magic, it has no special effects. For example, if you enlighten a stone bird, it might talk, run, and jump, but it definitely won't fly because it's a stone bird. Just as George was engrossed in learning magic, the lid of the box suddenly opened, and David's panicked voice came in. "George, come out and save me. A real wizard is trying to kill me, and he's released a pack of wolves." Finally, George's heart skipped a beat. He knew that Balthazar and Horvath's seals must have been broken, and Horvath had come looking for the dragon ring and Morgana's nesting doll seal. Leaping out of the box, he shielded David behind him, his bare paws swatting away two vicious wolves that lunged at him, which then transformed back into paper scraps and fell to the ground. A panda, Horvath, wearing a coat and carrying a cane, walked over with some confusion, watching his wolves, conjured with mimicry magic, vanish in an instant. He hadn't expected David to have a panda as a pet. "A mere panda can't save you." Pointing his cane at the iron railing of the nearby stairs, the railing instantly snapped up, transforming into a sharp javelin that flew towards George. "Using a metal weapon against me? You're asking for death." Seeing the flying javelin, George raised his bare paw, his superpowers exploding instantly, stopping the javelin steadily in front of him. No matter how Horvath tried to control the javelin with magic, it wouldn't budge. "Here you go." With a flick of his bare paw, the javelin flew back at an even faster speed, heading straight for Horvath. Seeing the javelin bounce back, Horvath's expression changed slightly. He swung his cane, and the powerful force immediately deflected the javelin from its original trajectory, causing it to narrowly miss him. "It's still a panda who only knows magic." Horvath's expression became slightly more serious. However, the next second, his body was suddenly pierced through from behind by the javelin. George controlled the javelin using supernatural abilities, not magic. It wasn't a matter of dodging it once and being fine. Magnetic control allowed him to control the javelin indefinitely as long as it was within range. "Well, you surprised me a bit." Horvath looked at the metal javelin that had pierced through his back and chest, a hint of surprise on his face, but no fear. His body instantly transformed into a swarm of cockroaches, then reformed into human form, the javelin expelled from his body. As expected of a 1,000-year-old mage, he does have some tricks up his sleeve. George secretly admired him. This magic was enough to make Horvath immune to any physical attack. Even if a Gatling gun fired wildly at his body, creating many holes, he could turn into a cockroach and regenerate. It was just a bit disgusting. "Go." Horvath, having regained his physical form, raised his cane, unleashing an invisible attack towards George. If George were hit, even with his panda-like body, he would likely be sent flying by the powerful force. Armor protection. Fortunately, George was no slouch either. Sensing the approaching energy, he raised his hand and cast an ironclad charm to protect himself, blocking the powerful attack. At the same time, a faint green light emanated from his hand. Avada Kedavra, taking a beating wasn't his style. Since his opponent could transform into a cockroach to evade physical attacks, he would directly use the killing charm to attack the soul. Horvath, who hadn't been particularly concerned, sensed the death energy emanating from the green light. His expression changed drastically. He dared not transform into a cockroach to take the hit head-on anymore, and immediately moved a nearby trash can to his side as a shield. The green light struck the trash can, sending it flying, but it dissipated without hitting Horvath. The killing curse is powerful, but its accuracy is too low. We need to find a way to improve it in the future. Seeing that the killing curse was blocked, George did not give up and continued to cast a second spell. Divine Blade, a transparent blade shot out quickly. Because of its transparency and concealment, Horvath was hit in the body before he could react. Even though he transformed into a cockroach in time, he still had a wound on his waist when he reassembled. The key thing was that there seemed to be a special force entangled in this wound, and even with his body's regenerative ability, it could not be healed. "Damn panda, I'll kill you." Horvath was furious because he was injured. Apart from Balthazar, no one had been able to hurt him in recent years. Stone giant, Horvath stuck his cane into the ground, and the ground immediately changed. In the blink of an eye, a 5-meter-tall stone giant rose from the ground and rushed towards George and David. I can't believe mimicry magic can be used like this. Amazing, George couldn't help but exclaim in amazement as the stone giant charged towards him. He'd never seen this move in the movies. Fortunately, he had a countermeasure. Thunder explosion. Chapter 138 Mirror World. George's explosive charm struck the stone giant, instantly shattering one of its arms. Seeing the effect, he immediately unleashed a second explosive charm, this time targeting the stone giant's leg. Boom! With its left leg broken, the stone giant's movement speed was impaired, and a third explosive charm followed, then a fourth, and a fifth. By the time the stone giant reached George, all 5 explosive charms had shattered into small stones. Let's see if you can blast faster or if my stone giant can spawn faster. However, just as George dealt with the first stone giant, Horvath pulled out a second one. He believed that as a top-tier mage of 1,000 years, with a mage level exceeding 700, the total amount of magic power within him definitely surpassed that of the magical panda. He didn't believe this panda could shatter 3 or 4, let alone 8 or 10 trying to compete with me in magic power. George couldn't help but chuckle inwardly as the second stone giant attacked again, but his explosive charms didn't stop. In terms of total magic power, he couldn't compare to Horvath's, who possessed 1,000 years of magic power. However, his wizarding bloodline allowed him to regenerate magic quickly. Even if he continued like this until dawn, his magic power wouldn't be depleted much. He was most afraid of this kind of protracted battle. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosive spells rang out, and stone giants collapsed one after another. Horvath gradually realized something was wrong. His mimicking of a stone giant consumed a considerable amount of magic power, and the magic used by his opponent to destroy his stone giants shouldn't be much less. Yet, he felt his magic power was running low, while his opponent remained calm and unperturbed. They seemed completely unconcerned. Just then, a cry of an eagle suddenly came from behind him. Turning around, he saw a huge steel eagle descending from the sky, attacking him. Standing atop the steel eagle was his nemesis, Balthazar. You just wait. Caught between 2 attackers, there was no chance of victory if he stayed any longer. He pointed at the glass of a shop behind him. Mirror world. Then, he leaped into the mirror and disappeared. That magic looks pretty good. Watching Horvath escape through the mirror, George didn't give chase. This old magician had many tricks up his sleeve. A hasty pursuit might lead to him falling into a trap. Horvath's spell was called Mirror World, recorded in the Book of Morgana, a very high-level special magic. It allows one to use a mirror as a medium to enter a completely opposite mirror world. This magic has many uses. It can be used for escape. Once inside the mirror world, enemies who don't understand special magic are generally unable to continue the pursuit. Furthermore, one can find a mirror in the mirror world at any time to return to the real world. Therefore, it can also be used for infiltration. For example, one can enter the mirror world first, then reach the vicinity of the desired destination in the opposite mirror world, find a place with a mirror, and escape. Finally, it can be used to trap people. By throwing an enemy into the mirror world and smashing all the nearby mirrors, the enemy must find a place with a mirror in the mirror world to escape. Let that guy escape. The metal giant eagle landed, and Balthazar jumped down, looking at Horvath, who had already disappeared into the mirror. With a slight regret on his face. He then looked at David, then at George. I saw a large number of police officers on their way from the air. Hop on my giant eagle, let's get out of here and have a proper talk. You're the magician who gave me the ring 10 years ago? David stepped out from behind George and recognized Balthazar immediately. George leaped onto the giant eagle first, answering telepathically, of course, no problem. Balthazar's skill in mimicry magic was no less than Horvath's. This metal giant eagle looked quite impressive to George. He planned to place many similar giant metal statues around the school once he mastered mimicry magic, so any enemies would get a beating from the statues first. I'm fine with that too. Seeing George board the giant eagle, David followed and sat next to George. Because of George's life-saving grace, he now trusted George even more. Balthazar, looking at the panda like George, was full of doubts, but immediately took control of the giant eagle and flew away quickly. Having lived for over 1,000 years, he had seen even extinct dragons, but this was the first time he had ever seen a panda that possessed magic and could communicate telepathically with humans. However, it was clear that this panda was David's friend and on their side, which was a good thing. The giant eagle carried the two men and the bear at high speed, quickly arriving at the rooftop of a building, the tallest building George had first observed when he began observing this world. Jumping off the eagle and standing on the rooftop, the two men and the bear began to communicate. 10 minutes later, Balthazar said, "So, George, you were turned into a bear because of special magic, and you want David to help you turn back, right?" "That's right. After all, legend says you've been searching for Merlin's reincarnation, and David, wearing the dragon ring, must be Merlin's reincarnation. Of course, if you can help me return to normal, I would be extremely grateful," George replied telepathically. Balthazar scrutinized George carefully, then shook his head. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. I can't see any trace of transformation magic on you. Perhaps only someone with my teacher's power could turn you back to normal." He wasn't lying, he genuinely couldn't see anything, just as George was originally a panda. He could only shake his head regretfully. However, he could sense that George possessed very powerful magic within him. Although not as strong as his own, he was still quite skilled, probably around level 300. But the fact that he could hold his own against Hogwarts, who was over level 700, for so long surprised him. "Let me make this clear, I really don't want to get involved in similar dangers again. I probably can't help you," David spoke up at this moment. He was just an ordinary college student, passionate about physics, and didn't want to experience another chase like the one they had just gone through. Balthazar didn't offer any grand reasoning to David's refusal. Instead, he nodded, "Fine, as long as you help me retrieve the sealed nesting dolls and reseal Hogwarts, I will no longer disturb your peaceful life. Otherwise, even if we leave you, Hogwarts will come back to bother you. You are Merlin reincarnated and will become the most powerful magician. He won't rest until he kills you." He had long seen that David hadn't lost the dragon ring in the past 10 years because he still harbored a desire for magic. With a little magical enticement later, he wasn't worried about David not being tempted. So, this was merely a delaying tactic. Chapter 139 Chinatown Magical Melee. "Okay, I'll help you, but I threw the nesting doll away when it was in front of the shop," David thought for a moment, then finally went into Balthazar's nest. George, who had been watching closely, didn't say anything to warn him, because he probably wanted David to go into the nest too, so he could learn the magic of the Book of Merlin together. "Threw it away, let me see." Upon hearing this, Balthazar immediately began casting a spell. The nesting doll had his magical mark on it, allowing him to locate it no matter where it was. After a moment, he slowly opened his eyes. "It's in the downtown area, probably in Chinatown. We need to hurry, we can't let Hogwarts get there first. Why don't you use your eagle?" Seeing that Balthazar didn't use the giant eagle to carry them to Chinatown as before, but instead headed towards the building's staircase, David was also full of doubt. Balthazar explained, "We mages try our best to avoid attracting human attention. This is a rule we Merlin-style mages have always followed. There are too many people in the downtown area, and controlling the giant eagle there would be too conspicuous. I have a car that I parked 10 years ago in the parking lot below this building. We'll drive there. If you're worried about being too conspicuous, I can take you there," George said. They needed to hurry now, ideally getting the nesting dolls before Hogwarts, which would save them a lot of trouble. "How will you take us there?" Balthazar and David looked at George with some confusion. A magic circle flashed on George's back, and a pair of large, pure white wings unfolded. "I'll fly you there." "Of course, you can actually fly." David's eyes nearly popped out as he looked at George flying in the air. He genuinely didn't know that this panda could fly. He'd never seen George fly before. "Great, then let's hurry over there." Balthazar was also surprised that George could use flight magic, but equally happy, because it meant they could get to Chinatown and get the nesting dolls much faster. Holding on to Balthazar and David on either side, George quickly flew towards Chinatown. About 20 minutes later, they landed on the roof of a 7-story residential building. "You two wait for me on the roof, I'm going to get the nesting dolls," Balthazar told George and David before heading down the stairs. David didn't know magic yet and couldn't be of much help, while George's panda body was too eye-catching. "Oh, it's so lively here." After Balthazar left, David looked at the red lanterns hanging below and the bustling streets, and couldn't help but exclaim. George replied, Because today is New Year's Day, which is like Christmas for you. He hadn't realized it was already New Year's Day in this world. David looked enlightened, but then suddenly said, "You're a panda, so does that mean you lived in China before?" "You could say that." George paused for a moment, then nodded. It was true that the panda came from China. His soul didn't belong to this world, but saying he came from China wasn't wrong either. "No wonder you know them so well." David hadn't expected the panda sorcerer to be a sorcerer from China. "I've always thought you and Po were alike." "Have you seen Kung Fu Panda?" "Yes, but I don't know Kung Fu, I only know magic." George shrugged. Just as the two were chatting on the rooftop, a window on the third floor below suddenly shattered, and Balthazar's figure flew out and crashed onto the bustling street. 3 figures then jumped down. The leader was Hogwarts, followed by a male and female sorcerer. "Balthazar, today is your death day. This guy is really fast. Looks like he wasted a lot of time chatting on the rooftop." Seeing this, George knew it was better to let Hogwarts find the nesting dolls first and release the 2 Morgana-affiliated sorcerers sealed inside. The Book of Morgana contains a time reversal spell that can recreate scenes from many years ago. Hogwarts found the nesting dolls ahead of time using this spell. "You stay here, I'll go help." George leaped down, spread his wings, and stealthily rushed towards Hogwarts from behind. Divine Strike without shadow, to catch the thief, first catch the king. George planned to take down Hogwarts first, and the remaining 2 would be easier. However, just as he cast the spell, Hogwarts transformed into a swarm of cockroaches, successfully dodging the Divine Strike without shadow spell. At the same time, the female mage, who looked only 17 or 18 years old, quickly turned her head and met George's eyes, her pupils instantly emitting a strange light. "You panda, did you think I'd fall for that a second time? I knew you were definitely nearby." Hogwarts reformed into human form, looking at George, who was controlled by the female mage's mental magic, his tone full of smugness. He knew that if he didn't eliminate Balthazar and the panda this time, even if he got the nesting dolls, he wouldn't escape being hunted down. So, after getting the nesting dolls in Chinatown first, he immediately unsealed the 2 Morgana-affiliated subordinates sealed inside the nesting dolls, and then ambushed them in the room beforehand. As George and his companions descended from the sky onto the rooftop, the female mage, skilled in mental magic, had already sensed their presence. Everything was under her control. Hogwarts. At this moment, Balthazar also rose from the ground. As a wizard whose strength was second only to Merlin and Morgana, he wasn't so easily defeated. He had simply been caught off guard by the sneak attack. Seeing George trapped in midair, he immediately clasped his hands together, and lightning, like plasma, rapidly condensed in his palms. This was Merlin's strongest offensive magic, a plasma spell upgraded from lightning magic, possessing considerable power. "Fire Dragon, drag him out first." Hogwarts ignored Balthazar, instead raising his wand to finish off the annoying panda before concentrating the 3 of them on dealing with Balthazar. Meanwhile, the male mage clasped his hands together at his chest, and the fire dragon drawn on his chest quickly came to life. The cloth dragon originally used for dragon dances on the street instantly transformed into a real, giant fire dragon, charging towards Balthazar. Seeing Balthazar blocked by the fire dragon and George about to be killed by Hogwarts, David on the rooftop panicked. He reached out, trying to cast a spell, but having only heard a few simple instructions from Balthazar on the way, he couldn't immediately calm down and cast a spell. However, at that moment, George's previously confused eyes instantly cleared, and his body rapidly expanded to nearly 5 meters. Before Hogwarts could even cast his spell, he swung his paw. This powerful bear paw sent both Hogwarts and the female mage flying more than 10 meters away, and the nesting doll was also knocked out of his hand. Chapter 140 Dragon Subduing Panda Palm. Fly, fly. The instant he knocked Hogwarts and the female sorceress away, George cast the summoning charm. The nesting dolls sealing Morgana and Veronica curved in midair and flew into George's hands, which he then tossed into his special storage. Mind control? Are you kidding me? Did you think his occlumency charm and psychic abilities were useless? He hadn't actually been controlled by the female sorceress, it was just a pretense to lower Hogwarts's guard. Hogwarts, this ancient sorceress, had top-notch survival skills. Without lowering his guard, it would be difficult to successfully ambush and retrieve the nesting dolls. Catch my old bear's roots. After putting away the nesting dolls, George leaped up, and his round, chubby body slammed down onto the fire-breathing dragon. Then, His enormous bare paws lashed out at the back of the dragon's head. "Take this again, my dragon subduing panda palm. Today I'll be Kung Fu Panda for once." Caught off guard, the fire dragon was slammed to the ground, its head swung wildly, and its flames became unstable. At this moment, Balthazar once again conjured plasma magic, and while the male mage was controlling the fire dragon to turn and bite George, he struck him in the stomach, piercing it instantly. With the male mage dead, the fire dragon he created naturally dissipated. The scene then became a 2-on-2 direct confrontation. "You guys are ruthless, let's go." Horvat stood up, spitting out blood. Seeing the male mage killed, he knew there was no chance of winning if he stayed any longer, and immediately turned and fled with a female mage. He hadn't had time to transform into a cockroach to dodge, and his body had taken a solid hit. If it weren't for the fact that a mage's body was already extraordinary due to years of meditation, he would have been killed on the spot. "If you don't cut the weeds at the root, they'll grow back in the spring. If we don't get rid of them now, they'll come back to steal the nesting dolls again," George immediately advised Balthazar telepathically when he saw him hesitate. "If you don't want to kill them, at least reseal them." Balthazar and Horvat, as fellow disciples, were once best friends, until their junior sister Veronica chose their senior brother Balthazar. Horvat, who also liked Veronica, turned to the dark side and sided with Morgana. In this respect, he was not as good as Linghu. Therefore, Balthazar always held back when fighting Horvat, unwilling to kill him. "All right, go after them." Balthazar looked up and shouted to David on the roof, "Wait for us here." With that, he and George chased after Horvat in the direction he had fled. At this time, because of the commotion, several police cars responsible for the New Year's security in Chinatown nearby also arrived after receiving reports. Horvat immediately used magic to knock away the police officers who got out of their cars and stole one. He had the female mage drive while he sat in the passenger seat and cast a superb mimicry spell on the police car. Under the effect of the mimicry spell, the police car instantly transformed into a supercar and sped away. Balthazar, who was following closely behind, also stole a police car and used mimicry magic to transform it into a supercar to give chase. Because of his panda body, even if George returned to his normal size, he would have difficulty getting into the car, so he simply spread his wings and flew up, giving chase in the air. "You're pretty fast." The two supercars below were chasing each other at breakneck speed, practically staging a magician version of Fast and Furious. Fortunately, George was also quite fast, and because he had the advantage of the air, he could launch aerial attacks on Horvat's supercar without restraint. Divine Strike without Shadow. He unleashed a series of Divine Strike without Shadow spells from the air, startling Horvat into immediately releasing a large cloud of mist with his cane, enveloping the sports car and obscuring George's vision. Seeing the rapidly moving mist below, George had no choice but to temporarily withdraw the Divine Strike without Shadow spells and continue the pursuit. With him monitoring from the air, the other party couldn't escape. Perhaps realizing this, after chasing for a distance, the mist suddenly stopped, meaning Horvat's supercar had come to a halt. Whirlwind. George stopped above the mist, waving his hand to release a whirlwind spell that forcibly dispersed it. What appeared before his eyes was no longer a supercar, but a tank. "Holy crap, you can do that!" George was somewhat dumbfounded. He thought transforming a police car into a supercar with mimicry magic was already outrageous, but he never expected it could turn into a tank. Boom. Presumably prepared, the tank aimed at him as soon as the mist dissipated, immediately firing the shell. Worried that the ironclad charm's defense might not be enough to withstand a tank, and considering the casting time required for the ironclad charm, he directly used an instant cast light-based defensive spell. Light. 3 pillars of guts. 3 pillars of light energy appeared out of thin air, then formed a holy white light magic circle, completely enveloping George. Indeed, it was the strongest light-based defensive spell, 3 pillars of guts, which Makarov had exceptionally taught him during the repair of Krobus City. Although he was only a beginner, its defensive capabilities far surpassed the ironclad charm, and crucially, it offered all-around protection and could be cast instantly. The only drawback was that maintaining such a top-tier light spell consumed too much mana, but George wasn't afraid of mana depletion. The shell struck George's 3 pillars of gods completely, and a deafening explosion rang out, yet the 3 pillars of gods' defensive shield didn't even tremble. Not to mention tank shells, even ordinary missiles might not be able to penetrate the 3 pillars of God's defense. "Oh God, I saw a panda angel." At the same time, The citizens near the streets stared wide-eyed at the panda with holy light and wings that appeared in the sky. Some devout believers had already begun in kneeling on the ground with their eyes closed, praying to George in the air. Meanwhile, Balthazar wasn't idle either. He stopped his supercar and charged straight at the tank, pressing his left hand against it, causing the entire tank to disintegrate into flower petals scattered on the ground. Simultaneously, his right hand stretched out, like an invisible giant reaching for Horvath's. Sensing danger, Horvath grabbed a nearby female sorceress to shield himself, then transformed into a swarm of cockroaches, attempting to escape through a roadside sewer entrance into the city's complex underground network. But just then, George descended from the sky, freeze. In an instant, all the cockroaches Horvath had transformed into were frozen in place. It was the freezing charm he had previously learned from Hermione, a spell used to immobilize small creatures. Horvath had used the cockroach transformation to evade his attacks and escape several times before, and he had been searching for a way to counter it. Finally, he remembered this relatively weak but effective group freezing charm specifically designed to kill small creatures. Indeed, as a magician, one must be familiar with different spells in order to deal with various situations with ease. Chapter 141 Matryoshka Doll Sealing Technique. George, give me the Matryoshka doll, Balthazar shouted as he saw George freeze the fleeing Horvaths with magic. George tossed a Matryoshka doll to Balthazar, who caught it with his left hand and began the sealing spell. As the spell took effect, the female mage, who looked 18 but was actually hundreds of years old, transformed into a pile of fine sand and gradually covered the surface of the Matryoshka doll, forming a new layer with her image on it. After sealing the female mage, he went to the frozen Horvaths and chanted the spell again. Horvaths also transformed into fine sand and was placed on the outermost layer. I must learn this Merlin-style sealing magic, George thought to himself as he watched Balthazar seal both the female mage and Horvaths. There was no sealing magic in the Book of Morgana. This magic was clearly Merlin's creation, and its sealing effect was extremely powerful. If he learned it, he could use the same method to trap enemies he couldn't kill temporarily, and then release them to kill them when he became stronger. Thank you, George. Without you, I wouldn't have been able to retrieve the Matryoshka dolls so easily, nor seal them away so readily. Balthazar solemnly thanked George after putting the dolls away. Although they had only known each other for a few hours, after the recent battle, he had a very good impression of George and recognized his strength. Now is not the time for thanks, we must leave. Hearing the distant sirens, George grabbed Balthazar and flew directly towards Chinatown. Taking David, who had been on the rooftop, with him, they returned to the roof of the building. David, this world isn't just made up of these few magicians. Many magicians hope that Morgana can break the seal and allow magicians to rule the world. We won this time, but if we don't defeat Morgana, no one can guarantee we'll win next time. So I hope you can think carefully about whether you want to join us and become a true magician. Balthazar held a dragon ring in his hand, asking David with some anticipation. George also transmitted his voice. David, magic is a very interesting power, and I believe you will like it. Besides, I think it's important to have some power of your own, so that when your family and friends are in trouble, at least you won't be helpless. And many girls like capable boys. Balthazar was conveying grand principles to David, talking about saving the world, while George was talking about smaller principles, the benefits of learning magic. Both grand and small principles, coupled with his own interest in magic, led him to take back the dragon ring after a moment's hesitation. All right, I agree. I said I would help you return to human form. Very good. Let's find a place, and I will teach you all of Merlin's magic in the future, making you a true sorcerer supreme. Balthazar smiled upon seeing David's agreement. George's panda face also smiled. In this world, as long as he stayed with Balthazar and David, he could learn Merlin's magic for free. Given Morgana's threat and the bond forged in the previous battle, Balthazar wouldn't refuse to guide him. His increased strength would be invaluable in the final battle to break Morgana's seal. From now on, his panda body in this world would primarily focus on two things. First, he would dedicate significant time to meditation to raise his magic level. All his clones shared physical attributes and abilities. Once one clone reached level 500 and gained immortality, the original body and other clones would also achieve immortality. Furthermore, raising his magic level would also increase his maximum magic power, thus amplifying the power of all spells. Second, he would wholeheartedly learn all the magic of this world alongside Balthazar and David, mastering both Merlin and Morgana's magic. Even after mastering all the magic in this world, he could continue meditating and practicing magic from other worlds, essentially using this clone purely for cultivation and practice. After all, aside from Morgana, this world was generally safe and relatively peaceful. I have a place that the professor introduced me to. It used to be a subway detour, but it was abandoned. It's a large and secluded space, and I often conduct physics experiments there. After deciding to study magic, David brought Balthazar and George to his secret base, where they began their formal magical studies. Meanwhile, his fairy tale clone was diligently studying basic transformation magic in the library. However, to improve the efficiency of magic learning at the school, he inscribed a Morgana ring in the library's open space and shared it with all the fairy tale mages. Unfortunately, apart from Levi, very few people had the patience to sit inside the ring and read magic books. George, your magic circle is amazing. It actually speeds up my understanding of magic. Combined with the wind chance classes, my magic learning efficiency has doubled. At 11 p.m., Levi finished her studies for the day and stood up from the Morgana ring. Wind chance classes could help with fast reading, but to truly understand the knowledge in the magic books, one still had to rely on their own slow comprehension. But the magic circle George had engraved in the library gave anyone standing inside it an instant sense of clarity, making thinking and learning incredibly efficient. It's already this late, we should probably head back. George checked the time and stood up from Morgana's ring. The fairy tale world had been peaceful lately. Natsu, Lucy, and Happy's secret S-rank mission had been perfectly resolved, since not only Grey went, but Urza did too. So the S-rank mission was naturally completed smoothly. It was said that during this mission, they encountered a demon even more powerful than the one from the cursed flute, and also met Grey's senior fellow students who studied ice-making magic. Let's go then. Mira Jane and the others have probably already gone back. Levi nodded and walked out of the library with George. At this moment, in the guild hall, Sarusuk and Daryl were fast asleep, slumped over their desks. These two couldn't stand reading in the library all the time, but they would wait for Levi to come out every day before returning to their dormitory together. After waking them up, the three of them and the cat locked the guild gates and headed towards the city center. Shortly after they left, a man with long black hair and more than a dozen earrings appeared at the guild entrance with a smile. Iron Dragon Slayer Magic, Iron Dragon Staff. Chapter 142 An Attack from the Dead of Night. The next day, under a bright sun, George woke up in his luxurious detached villa. Thanks to his superior wand, he had recently crafted a massive special artifact, sold it to a magic shop in the city, and made a fortune. With that money, he bought a luxurious villa in Magnolia City. After washing up, he used cooking magic to prepare breakfast for himself. After eating, he began practicing magic in the villa's courtyard. His daily routine in Fairy Tale consisted of practicing various spells in his villa in the morning, going to the guild for lunch to chat and catch up on information, and studying magic in the library in the afternoon and evening. Fiendfire, George carefully released a blue flame towards a designated area, then painstakingly controlled its movement and attacks. Feeling he had control, he gradually increased the power of Fiendfire, stopping it just before it was about to escape his control. Fiendfire was an extremely powerful fire spell. Due to its potent curse effect, it couldn't be extinguished by ordinary water, only stopping when there was nothing else to burn. Even someone as powerful as Grindelwald could burn the entire city of Paris to ashes with a Fiendfire spell. In fact, George, with his current top-tier wand, could achieve a similar feat if he unleashed the Fiendfire spell without restraint. The only difference between him and Grindelwald was that while his wand enhanced the spell's power, he couldn't control it as freely. Like now, when the power wasn't too great, he could control the Fiendfire to disappear at his will. If he unleashed its full power, it would simply disappear on its own after burning. He practiced until almost noon before leisurely walking out the door, spreading his wings, and flying towards the guild. Just as he passed the cathedral and was about to reach the guild near the East Forest, he saw Natsu, Lucy, Urza, Grey, and Happy also rushing towards the guild. Hey, Urza, you guys are back from your mission. Since returning from the S-rank mission on the Cursed Island, these people had formed a team to go on missions. This mission had lasted for over a week, so they must have just returned. George, did you know the guild was attacked? Urza asked hurriedly as she saw George appear in the sky. They had just returned to the city center when they heard citizens discussing the attack. George was stunned for a moment. The guild was attacked? No way, It was fine when I came back last night." With that, he accelerated and rushed towards the guild. Soon, the guild, riddled with large iron bars and in a mess, appeared before him. It really was attacked. Who dared to be so reckless? Fairy Tail was one of the strongest mage guilds in the kingdom, with Makarov of the 10 wizard saints at its helm. Wasn't this just asking for death? He and Urza, who had caught up with him, entered the guild. The hall was a complete mess. Going down the stairs to the basement, they found Guildmaster Makarov and the guild's mages temporarily waiting in the warehouse next to the library. "George, you're finally here. We've been waiting for you to repair the guild." Makarov was drinking when he saw George and immediately waved. "Urza, you're back too. We'll move up after George repairs the guild." "Old man, why are you still so relaxed? What's going on?" Natsu ran up, fuming, and asked. Makarov waved his hand dismissively. Calm down, calm down. It was those phantom lords. They're so bored. They only dare to cause trouble when no one's around. Like little kids, don't bother with them." "Phantom lords?" "The phantom lords." George's eyes showed surprise. He'd been in this world for quite a while, often chatting with the guild's mages at noon, and he had a certain understanding of the guilds and some famous mages in the kingdom. The Phantom Lords was also a mage guild, and one that could rival Fairy Tail in strength. It was said that the creator of the Phantom Lords and the creator of Fairy Tail had conflicts before their guilds were even founded, so the two guilds had always been at odds. The current guild master of Phantom Lord, Joseph Pora, is also one of the 10 wizard saints. However, he lost a fight with Makarov at a guild gathering 6 years ago, arguing about who was the strongest guild, and hasn't attended any guild gatherings since. Phantom Lord has more than 10 times the number of mages as Fairy Tail, and the number of mages at its headquarters alone is several times that of Fairy Tail. There are also more than a dozen branch guilds nationwide. The 4 elementalists are all S-rank mages, and below them is the Iron Dragon Slayer mage, known as the strongest man in the guild. "No, I can't accept this." Natsu smashed a nearby box with his fist, angrily declaring, "I'm going to smash their guild to pieces, otherwise I won't swallow this." "Natsu, calm down." Urza, though also furious, rationally restrained the impulsive Natsu. "Alright, let's leave it at that. George, could you please help repair the guild?" Makarov stood up and jumped off the table. "I drank too much, I need to pee." After Makarov left, Mira Jane came over to persuade him. "Natsu, don't blame the guild master. He's actually even angrier than you. It's just that the council strictly forbids guilds from fighting each other, and in serious cases, they might even force the guild to disband. Damn it, they attacked us first." Natsu was full of resentment, and the other mages in the guild remained silent, clearly also feeling resentful. George didn't say much about it, but simply flew down to the first floor and used a repair spell to restore the dilapidated guild to its original state. He felt it was best to listen to the guild master in such matters. If a guild war really broke out, as a member of Fairy Tail, he certainly wouldn't back down, and it would also be a good opportunity to practice his newly learned magic. If there was no war, then he would continue to focus on learning magic. In any case, for someone as rational as him, there was no need to let such a small matter disrupt his normal study rhythm. After the guild was repaired, everyone returned to the main hall from the warehouse. After lunch, he continued studying magic with Levy in the library, though Levy seemed quite worried. That evening, everyone dispersed, with George and Levy staying late to read. However, unlike yesterday, the 3 of them and the cat had barely left the guild when they were stopped by a mage while passing Southgate Park. "Hey, you guys are mages from Fairy Tail, right?" "Yes, we are." "What do you want?" Levy looked at the long-haired mage with an unfriendly expression, her face showing unease. George's eyes narrowed. He sensed the powerful magic and undisguised hostility emanating from the mage. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 George, the Nemesis of the Iron Dragon. "Remember my name, Phantom Lord, Iron Dragon Slayer Mage Gajiel," the long-haired mage sneered, his figure flashing as he charged towards the 3 people and the cat at incredible speed. "You're the mage who attacked our guild, aren't you? Let me teach you a lesson." Sarusak activated his divine speed spell, meeting his opponent's attack even faster. then leaped up and kicked at his opponent's long face. Falcon soars, however, Gadgil made no attempt to dodge, simply transforming his body into a black, iron-like form, using his long face to take Sarusuk's magic attack head-on. A bizarre scene unfolded. When Sarusuk's foot struck Gadgil's face, Gadgil was completely unharmed, his speed unchanged, while Sarusuk was sent flying. Clearly, their strengths were on completely different levels. At this moment, Daryl and Levi also reacted, the two forming a well-coordinated team. Daryl scattered a seed, and thick vines quickly sprouted from the ground, coiling around Gadgil. Immediately afterward, Levi wrote the word stone, and a large rock appeared out of thin air, hurtling towards Gadgil, who was entangled in the vines. Iron Dragon Slayer magic, Iron Dragon Sword. Unfortunately, these attacks posed no threat to Gadgil. His right hand transformed into a serrated, rapidly spinning steel sword, easily slicing the vines and rock to shreds. Before Daryl and Levi could launch another magical attack, he was already above them. Damn it, seeing their magic had no effect, Daryl and Levi knew they were doomed. Gadgil, the Iron Dragon Slayer mage of the Phantom Lord, possessed strength no less than a typical S-rank mage. He was indeed beyond the capabilities of mages like them. However, just as Gadgil's attack was about to strike Levi and Daryl, a voice suddenly rang out. Stop! Gadgil's body was instantly frozen in place by the voice. It turned out that George, who had been observing all along, had finally made his move. Iron Dragon Slayer mage, your entire body, even your magic, is filled with the scent of metal. George spread his wings and flew in front of Gadgil, saying to Levi and Daryl, you two take Sarusuk and retreat a bit, I can't hold him in place for long. If the attacker were any other S-rank mage from the Phantom Lords besides Gadgil, he would have immediately taken Levi and fled towards the fairy tale dormitory. Even with a top-tier wand, he had no confidence in fighting an S-rank mage like Urza. But since the attacker was this Iron Dragon Slayer mage, whose entire body exuded a metallic aura, he wasn't afraid. Okay. George, be careful. Levi and Daryl quickly pulled Sarusuk, who had been knocked to the ground and was still recovering, back to the side. They had always thought George wasn't particularly skilled in combat, but they hadn't expected him to be able to hold off the S-rank Gadgil, and crucially, they hadn't seen any trace of George using magic. Interesting. I didn't expect a cat to possess such strange magic. Gadgil tried to move his body but found an invisible force restricting him, causing his expression to become slightly more serious. But this little bit of power can't hold you back, Gadgil. Suddenly, his magical power erupted, forcefully breaking through George's magnetic restriction with brute force. Gadgil's swing of the Iron Dragon Sword, though slower than before due to George's magnetic resistance, was still terrifying, beyond the reach of ordinary mages. Watch out! George, Derek and the other two, seeing Gadgil move again, immediately warned George while preparing to cast spells to help. Go! However, George didn't dodge this time, but instead raised his paw and swung it upwards. The force that had been binding Gadgil's body was all concentrated in one direction, sending Gadgil flying like a rocket, finally being fixed in midair 20 meters high by George. George's magnetic control, after a year of development and growth, had basically reached its limit, namely a force of 1,000 pounds. Judging solely by mutant levels, the magnetic force alone is equivalent to that of a level 3 mutant. Such force is naturally insufficient to restrain Gadgil's S-class strength, but it can easily send him flying into the air. Without any leverage in the air, even with Gadgil's formidable physique, he is powerless, his strength crippled by more than half. What bizarre magic! Gadgil, forcibly suspended in the air, unable to move or fall, looked at the cat flying to the same height as him, a serious expression appearing on his face for the first time. Normally, if the opponent used air magic or levitation to control his body, he would definitely sense it and dodge. Even if he were hit, he could use the powerful magic of his Dragon Slayer magic to forcibly break free of the magic's effect. But in this situation, he couldn't sense how the opponent had cast the magic, saw no trace of it, and didn't even feel any fluctuations in magical energy before being inexplicably affected. Even now, after being hit, he still hasn't found any trace of the magic, let alone broken it. His body floats in the air, and no matter how much he flails his limbs, he can't move or land, putting him in a very passive situation. Since that's the case, then this is the only way. He looks up at George, then takes a deep breath, his mouth puffing out rapidly. Iron Dragon Slayer magic, roar of the Iron Dragon, He thinks that as long as he defeats the cat controlling his body, he can naturally break this strange magic. Unfortunately, just as his magic is about to be unleashed, George smiles. Come on, turn around. He's seen Natsu's fire dragon roar before. Its power can blast a huge hole in the ground. This Gadgeal is stronger than Natsu. Even with the 3 pillar gods, he probably couldn't defend against it, so he simply uses magnetism to force his body to turn around. Gadgeal, who was originally standing in the air facing George, immediately lies flat, his face towards the sky. George, on the other hand, had a blind spot below him, completely out of his sight. Gadgeal flailed his limbs, trying to turn around, but couldn't budge it due to the lack of leverage. He tried to twist his head to aim his mouth at George, but couldn't even see him. So, in the end, his incredibly powerful roar of the Iron Dragon could only be helplessly shot upwards into the sky, ending without a trace. It's my turn. George flew directly below Gadgeal, using magnetism to immobilize its body, while simultaneously drawing his top-grade magic wand and aiming it at Gadgeal's back. Knockout. Chapter 144 George, I'm really not that strong. The sleeping charm successfully hit Gadgeal, whose eyes immediately began to droop. However, due to his status as a dragon slayer, his body possessed dragon-like characteristics, granting him high resistance to magic. Combined with his powerful magic and strong willpower, his eyelids reopened before they even fully closed. George, unsurprised, continued waving his wand. Stun. 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 One stun charm after another was cast, until over 100 were stacked, at which point Gadgeal finally succumbed and fell into deep sleep. Even with high magic resistance, as long as a character isn't immune, sheer numbers can still be effective. Dragons in the Harry Potter world also have high magic resistance, but 100 adult wizards using the sleeping charm together can still have an effect. George, you actually defeated Spectre's Gadgeal. Lovey and the others were still reeling from the shock when George landed with the unconscious Gadgeal. Gadgeal is an S-ranked mage of Phantom Assassin, while George is most renowned in the guild for his miraculous healing magic, never displaying any truly formidable combat prowess. Even Urza and the others only knew that George had a rapid mana regeneration rate and possessed many highly supportive spells. In the fight against Aragorn, Urza was the primary contributor, with George only managing to succeed by ambushing him when his mana was nearly depleted. But today, George's fight with Gadgeal was like a father beating his son. He was completely unable to retaliate, and the battle ended in just 2 or 3 minutes. How could this not shock them? If they hadn't fought Gadgeal before, they might have thought he was all talk and no action. But they had just personally experienced the power of Iron Dragon Gadgeal. The 3 of them barely managed to withstand a single move from him, all their attacks easily countered. The difference in strength still left them shaken. It's not what you think. My strength is far from enough. I only defeated him mainly due to luck. George waved his hand with a smile. He wasn't being modest. It was true that if his superpower hadn't been a perfect counter to Gadgeal, he wouldn't have been able to defeat him so easily. Fighting Gadgeal was like Magneto fighting Wolverine. It was simply too effective against him. It was only because Gadgeal specialized in Dragon Slayer magic, and all his attacks were related to metal, that he was so easily countered. If he had learned even a little bit of other types of magic, he wouldn't have been so thoroughly outmatched. If he had fought Natsu, this outcome would have been completely different. Really, I'm not lying to you. I have a magic specifically designed to counter metal, and he just happened to run into it. Seeing that Lovey and the others still didn't believe him, he could only shake his head helplessly. Alright, let's take him to the dormitory first, and then have Mira Jane go find the guild master to see what to do next. This was no longer just about destroying an empty guild. Phantom Lord Zace Mage had attacked Fairy Tale's mages. If it weren't for him, Lovey and the others would have been in serious trouble. This was a serious violation of the rules set by the council, and they'd been caught red-handed. There was no way to deny it. Knowing Makarov as he did, he knew this couldn't just be left like it was during the day. Yes, let's go find Mira Jane. We can't let this go. Lovey, realizing what was happening, puffed out her cheeks in anger and jumped up to slap the unconscious Gadgeal, who was floating in midair. Ouch, this guy's face is tough. However, her slap only hurt herself more than her enemy. With Gadgeal's body as hard as iron, a slap to the face was no different than hitting a block of iron. So, the 3 of them, along with the captured Gadgeal, stormed towards Fairy Tale's dormitory. For Lovey and the others, the guild was like their home, And the Guildmaster and Mira Jane were like their grandfather and older sisters. If they were wronged, they would definitely seek their help. Southgate Park wasn't far from the fairy tale dormitory, and they arrived at the dormitory in less than 10 minutes. Sarusuk, Dierl, you two go to the boys' dormitory and call Natsu and the others down. Lovey, you go to the girls' dormitory and call Mira Jane and Urza. I'll wait for you here. George gave the order, and the three of them immediately rushed into the dormitories on either side. Soon, the roars of fairy tale mages echoed from both sides, clearly enraged by the news that Lovey and the others had been attacked by phantom mages. Then, in a flurry of activity, they all rushed down fully armed. Sarusuk, you're the fastest. Go to Lucy's house and tell Urza and the others to come over. I'm going to find the Guildmaster. We might have a big operation tonight. Mira Jane, usually so gentle, showed a rare expression of anger on her face. After giving Sarusuk the order, a pair of demon wings sprouted from her back, and she flew towards the eastern forest. So it's true, watching Mira Jane grow demon wings and fly away, George had a thoughtful expression on his face. He listened to gossip in the lobby every noon, and he'd actually heard some of it about Mira Jane. The most shocking piece of gossip was that Mira Jane, the sweet and gentle older sister who often cried over something Natsu and Gray said, was actually an S-class mage. It was said that Mira Jane's strength was once comparable to Urza's, and she was a delinquent girl who loved to compete with Urza. The magic she used wasn't the commonly used transformation magic, but rather the most terrifying and dreadful form of receiving magic, demon receiving, allowing her to fuse with demons in battle. It was only because a mission resulted in her sister's death that her personality changed drastically, leading to her current state. She no longer used receiving magic in battle and became a support staff member for Fairy Tail. However, the aura and magical energy she unleashed in that moment of anger just now were definitely not those of an ordinary mage. Therefore, he felt that the rumor might not be entirely false. So this is Gadgil from Phantom Flame. He actually ambushed our Levy. When he wakes up, we'll beat him so badly even our guild leader won't recognize him. After Mira Jane left, the fairy tale mages glared at Gadgil floating in the air, wishing they could tear him apart. If it weren't for their mage pride, seeing that Gadgil was currently powerless to fight back, they would have already made their move. The petite, cute, and kind-hearted Lovey was very popular among the male mages of Fairy Tail. Lovey, I didn't expect you guys to actually defeat Phantom Flame's ace, Gadgil. It seems your strength has increased a lot since then. After everyone calmed down a bit, the guild's most skilled intelligence-gathering mage, Rabbit Tooth, looked at Lovey with a sigh. Chapter 145 The Ghost's Plot. Perhaps the average person would think that Iron Dragon Gadgil was nothing special, but as an intelligence expert, Rabbit Tooth Man knew that Gadgil's title as the Phantom Assassin's Ace Mage was absolutely well-deserved. His strength was certainly no less than that of the Four Elements. Because Iron Dragon Gadgil's reputation was earned through sheer hard work, he had once single-handedly taken on several dark guilds. It wasn't us, we were no match for Iron Dragon Gadgil at all, it was George. George easily defeated Iron Dragon Gadgil on his own and saved us. Lovey quickly waved her hands, blushing. George, all the mages turned to look at George, who was still pondering the rumors about Mira Jane, their faces filled with disbelief. They were surprised, but could barely accept that Lovey and her two companions had defeated the S-rank Iron Dragon Gadgil with perfect teamwork. But to say that George had defeated Gadgil one-on-one was something they truly hadn't expected. It's like asking if you could imagine Happy defeating Natsu? Would you believe me if I said it was luck? George, seeing everyone staring at him, helplessly spread his cat paws. Although he felt that with his top-tier wand and the combination of various magic and superpowers, he could barely hold his own against an S-rank like Urza for a while, or even escape, the probability of defeating her was extremely small. He was aware of this much. However, in the current situation, it was clear that he couldn't explain it clearly, so he could only shut his cat mouth. In fact, George didn't have a clear understanding of his own strength. He didn't know that the S-rank of Fairy Tail Guild was actually different from the S-rank mages of other magic guilds. The only S-rank he had ever met, Erriger, felt that Erriger's strength was far less than Urza's. But in fact, the Grim Reaper Erriger's strength had already surpassed that of many S-rank mages in other magic guilds. The main reason was that George had always stayed in the guild and didn't have a clear understanding of the strength of mages in this world. His only standard of reference was Urza. 15 minutes later, Urza, now clad in her heavenly armor, flew over, carrying Natsu in one arm and Gray in the other. Following closely behind were Happy, embracing Lucy with outstretched wings, and Sulusuk, running on the ground. 20 minutes later, Mira Jane arrived with Guildmaster Makarov. Makarov landed, his face still contorted with rage, the terrifying magical power emanating from his body almost overflowing. If it were just smashing up the guild, I could tolerate it, but attacking a guild member? I absolutely cannot tolerate that. All fairy tale mages, listen up. Tonight, we officially declare war on Phantom Lord. Let's move out now. Attack, attack, attack. Hearing that Makarov had finally decided to fight Phantom Lord, the fairy tale mages, already seething with anger, cheered. Attack, huh? Good. Now we can finally see the battle between the world's top 10 wizard saints. At this moment, George felt his heart begin to burn with excitement. Having always studied magic in the library, his knowledge of much of this world's magic was limited to his impressions. This time, with so many mages clashing, he would finally witness it firsthand. The battle between the 10 wizard saints was also crucial. Just thinking about it made him think it would be incredibly intense. Guildmaster, wait a minute. Let me check his memories first. Just as Makarov was about to lead everyone away aggressively, George stopped him. He felt that Phantom Lord hadn't done anything so outrageous in all these years, and this sudden attack on Fairy Tail, defying the council, might be part of a conspiracy. Therefore, it was safer to use legilimency and psychic abilities to examine Gadgeel's memories first. Phantom Lord's strength was comparable to Fairy Tail's, and they had the numerical advantage. They couldn't be too careless. Memory reading magic. Makarov was immediately stunned. Memory-related magic wasn't easy to learn, it required high talent, and very few people in the entire magic world knew how to use it. Besides the mage he had sent to infiltrate the council, Mester Gled, only Thor, one of Phantom Lord's 4 elements, was known in this area. Unexpectedly, George was also skilled in this kind of magic. I think learning more different types of magic will always come in handy. George reached out and lifted Gadgeel's sedation spell. While Gadgeel's will was still weak after just waking up, George looked into his eyes and cast the legilimency spell. Legilimency. After a moment, George couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. So that's how it is. It turned out that he learned from Gadgeel's memories that Phantom Lord's real purpose in attacking the fairy tale mages was to capture Lucy, the heiress of the Heart Failure Foundation. Lucy was the heiress of the wealthiest Heart Failure Foundation in the kingdom, and she had run away from home because she didn't want to be forced into a business marriage by her father. Phantom Lord's master had attacked Fairy Tail at the request of Lucy's father. However, according to Gadgeel's memories, Phantom Lord's master wasn't really doing it for a mission. Instead, he wanted to capture Lucy to control her father, absorb the entire Lockhart Foundation's wealth, and strengthen the guild. Of course, it would be even better if he could also eliminate the Fairy Tail Guild. Roar of the Iron Dragon. Gadgeel, waking up, saw a group of fairy tale mages around him and was about to unleash magic when Guildmaster Makarov's enlarged fist slammed him into the ground. Kid, you better behave yourself. After physically knocking Gadgeel unconscious, Makarov looked at George and asked, "Did you find any useful information?" Yes, George immediately told Makarov the memories he had read. Everyone was also surprised to hear that Lucy was actually the heiress of the Lockhart Foundation. Lucy's usual behavior was nothing like that of a wealthy heiress. "I'm so sorry, it's all because of my willfulness that the guild was attacked." Lucy's face showed guilt after learning that everything was caused by her father. She loved Fairy Tail, loved her current life and her companions, but she never expected to bring such a big trouble to the guild. "Even without you, it would have been the same. Phantom Lord had his eye on your family's money, and they've always been at odds with the guild," George casually comforted her. That's true. In his eyes, Lucy was just a trigger. Even without Lucy, there might have been Lucy East or Lucy North, a fight was inevitable sooner or later. "What are you talking about, Lucy? Since they dared to mess with us, let's just beat them all down." Natsu clapped his fists together, his face beaming with excitement. "But you really don't look like a young lady, eh?" Happy raised his point agreement. End of month request for monthly votes. My liver is about to explode these past few days. Chapter 146. The fight begins. The fight begins. "Lucy, don't be afraid. Fairy Tail is the strongest guild. We'll beat Phantom Lord to pulp for you. Protecting the young lady is a man's duty. Lucy, I'm still waiting to be the first to read your novel. Don't give up like this." You're a member of our strongest team, you should be in charge of your own life. Not a single fairy tale mage complained about Lucy being the trigger. Instead, they all comforted her. Finally, Makarov waved his hand domineeringly and said, "Lucy, now that you've joined our guild, you're a member of the guild, you're my child. No one can bully my child, Makarov's child. Let's go, we're going to Phantom Lord." Hearing everyone's heartwarming words of comfort, Lucy burst into tears. "Guildmaster, how do we get there?" At this moment, George raised a crucial question. Magnolia City was quite a distance from Phantom Lord's headquarters, and most of the guild's mages couldn't fly. They couldn't just run there. If they did, they'd be too exhausted to fight by the time they arrived. "I heard the guild has a space magic device that allows large numbers of mages to teleport between cities. Does Fairy Tail have one too?" "What are you talking about, George? We Fairy Tail don't have the money for such an expensive magic device. Let's take the train." Makarov waved his hand awkwardly. "I have a good relationship with the mayor. He'll arrange a special temporary train for us, so everyone can rest and recharge on the train." Since Natsu and the other kids grew up, the guild has been in deficit every month. It was only after George arrived that it gradually returned to positive income. Where would they get the money to order that ridiculously expensive space magic device? "Okay, the train is fine too," George blinked, not continuing the awkward topic. But he secretly thought to himself, "Once my alchemy skills improve, I must learn how to make porkies first." "Let's go." Makarov waved again, and everyone rushed towards the train station. Even Mary Jane, who wasn't fighting anymore, came along this time. Mainly because he was worried about leaving Mary Jane alone at the guild and her encountering any danger. As for Gadgil, who had been physically knocked unconscious by Makarov, he was naturally taken on the train as well, ironclad evidence of the Phantom Menace attack. The train started moving, and Natsu immediately went into motion sickness mode. George used the levitation charm to keep him afloat, alleviating his nausea. However, to his surprise, Gadgil, after waking up, also became carsick. Something seems off. Seeing Gadgil's motion sickness, George immediately became suspicious and looked at Mary Jane. "Mary Jane, does Laxus get carsick?" "I don't know, but I've never seen Laxus ride in a car. He usually moves like lightning when he's on missions. He's very fast," Mary Jane replied after a moment's thought. At this moment, Makarov beckoned George to his side and whispered an explanation. "Laxus gets carsick too. I asked some old friends, and it seems like all dragon slayers are prone to motion sickness. So if you want to become a dragon slayer, you should think it through. All dragon slayers get carsick? What a weird weakness," George couldn't help but complain. But after thinking about it carefully, he realized it wasn't a big deal for him. First, he could fly, so not using transportation wouldn't be a problem. Second, he would learn apparition later, so who would need transportation if they could teleport? Finally, he figured he could find a way to get rid of this weakness as he explored so many magical worlds. The train sped along, getting closer and closer to Oga City, where the Phantom Lord was located, and everyone's excitement grew. Meanwhile, in Oga City, the oldest city in the northeast of the kingdom, inside the largest building in the city center, the headquarters of the Phantom Lord, Guildmaster Joseph was in a meeting with the guild's 4 elementalists. "Once Gadgil returns, if things go smoothly, our next plan is," he had sent Gadgil to attack the fairy tale mages, and given Makarov's temper, he would definitely bring most of the guild's mages to retaliate tomorrow. Then, they could send 2 elementalists to kidnap the target, distracting Makarov and allowing the air elementalist to launch a sneak attack to deplete Makarov's magic. Without Makarov, one of the 10 wizard saints, Fairy Tail would be easily defeated. If the council questioned them, they could turn the tables, claiming that Fairy Tail had attacked them and they were merely acting in self-defense. Once Fairy Tail was completely wiped out, coupled with his acquisition of the Rotfilia Foundation's wealth and some connections with the council, they wouldn't be able to really do anything to the council. "Don't worry, Guildmaster. With Gadgil's strength, as long as he doesn't recklessly attack those S-rank mages, he should be fine," Arya, the leader of the 4 elements, replied with tears in her eyes. Joseph nodded as well. Although Gadgil is a bit arrogant, he still knows what's important and won't do anything he's not confident about. Boom. However, just as the group was discussing and refining their plan, a roar suddenly came from below. "Fairy Tail is here. Joseph, come down here and die." "It's Makarov. Why is he here at this time? What is Gadgil up to?" Hearing Makarov's roar, Joseph jumped to his feet. The plan has changed. I'll fight Makarov in a bit. Arya, don't make a move. Hide in the shadows and wait for the right opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Everyone else, focus all your efforts on dealing with the other fairy tale mages. Down in the guild hall, seeing the fairy tale mages burst in, the Phantom Lord mages, who were drinking in a hall that was more than 10 times the size of the fairy tale guild hall, immediately got up and charged over. And so the chaotic battle began. Fire magic, purple net, pipe magic, phantom smoke fist, bullet magic, electric cannon, painting magic, rampage of ambition, wooden sculpture, shy love dem. Aside from Urza and Natsu's magic, George finally witnessed the magic of the other fairy tale mages firsthand. While their power wasn't particularly outstanding, each had its own unique characteristics. And in the current situation, basically every fairy tale mage could defeat a dozen or so Phantom Lord mages. Those like Urza and Natsu were practically invincible, unstoppable wherever they went. This made him understand why Fairy Tail, with its small number of members, was considered one of the most powerful mage guilds in the fairy tale universe. They were completely focused on an elite path. Chapter 147 The Terrifying 10 Saints. George and Mira Jane didn't participate in the battle. After explaining to Makarov how to defeat Gadgiel, he was assigned to guard the unconscious Gadgiel with Mira Jane. Gadgiel was the evidence that Phantom Lord had launched an attack on Fairy Tail, and they couldn't let Phantom Lord take him back, otherwise, the Council's investigation later would be difficult to explain. Of course, Lucy and Happy were also there. Lucy is a celestial spirit mage, and her battles consist of summoning celestial spirits to fight. She doesn't have much offensive power herself. Moreover, because most of her celestial spirits are quite individualistic and don't like to follow her commands, they act independently. So, after she summons a celestial spirit, she usually stays in the back cheering them on. Happy is even less useful. Besides assisting Natsu in flying, his offensive power is less than Lucy's when she's unarmed. Beat him up. Beat him up. Good job, Natsu. Everyone, keep it up. Be careful. Watching Phantom Lord's mages being defeated one by one, Mira Jane, Lucy, and Happy acted as the atmosphere setter. Urza, Natsu, and Gray, follow the guild master. Don't let him go up alone. George, who was currently analyzing the battle's effects to determine which mage's magic could be prioritized for later study, saw Makarov slap away each of the Phantom Mage blocking his path and then head straight up the stairs to the second floor. He quickly shouted to Urza and the other two, who were already engrossed in the battle. So far, neither Phantom Mage's guild master, Jose, nor any of the four elementalists had appeared. They were likely all on the second floor. Makarov was indeed strong, but the Phantom Mage's guild master was also a wizard of 10. If the Phantom Mage's guild master were to act shamelessly and team up with the four elementalists to gang up on Makarov while he was up there, it would be dangerous. If Makarov were to be defeated by a group, the scales of victory would tip, and Fairy Tail would no longer have the advantage. It was best not to be too reckless in these guild wars. After all, Phantom Mage had 4 S-class mages, while Fairy Tail only had Urza as an S-class mage today, and Mira Jane was unable to fight due to psychological issues. While Natsu and Gray were strong, they weren't S-class mages. He noticed that the Fairy Tail mages were good in every way, except they tended to get carried away in battle, often causing chaos and widespread unnecessary damage. Furthermore, George realized that the seemingly mature and composed guildmaster was actually the most reckless one inside. Normally, his plan would be to hand Gadgiel over to the Magic Council to deal with Phantom Lord, or at the very least, recall the S-class mages Mystigan and Laxus. This would give them at least 3 S-class mages, immediately leveling the gap in top-tier combat. However, since Makarov dared to attack so directly, he must have some confidence. He estimated that Makarov's strength far surpassed Joseph's, enough to close the gap in top-tier combat power. In any case, it wouldn't be because of him. He didn't have the strength of an S-class mage. He had already told Makarov why he had defeated Gadgiel. Because George used the megaphone spell when he shouted, his voice was very loud, instantly bringing Urza, Natsu, and Gray back to normal. The 3 of them then headed straight for the guildmaster. Let's go see too, seeing Urza and the others chase after him. George also controlled Gadgiel to lead Mira Jane, Lucy, and Happy to follow. The battle below wasn't a big problem, winning was just a matter of time. The main thing was the battle above. In fact, The battle above was the key to deciding the outcome of this guild war. If Makarov won, Fairy Tail would win. If he lost, then winning below wouldn't matter. A level 10 wizard was enough to sweep away all the wizards below. Joseph, I need an explanation from you, or I'll make you like you were 6 years ago. As soon as George reached the second floor, he heard Makarov's angry roar. At this moment, the second floor was a 4-on-4 situation, Guildmaster Makarov versus Joseph, Urza versus Thor, Natsu versus Usagi, and Gray versus Jogia. Huh? One's missing. Is he not at the guild? Glancing around the second floor hall, he noticed that Arya, the leader of the 4 elements, was absent. What a piece of trash. He got captured alive. And I admired him so much. Jose glanced at Gajiel, controlled by George, and immediately understood what had happened. He turned to Makarov and said, no explanation needed, Makarov. 6 years ago, you luckily defeated me, and you think you're really stronger than me? Today, I'm not only going to kill you, but I'll also kill all the mages of Fairy Tail, making Fairy Tail disappear from this world completely. Let everyone know that we, the Phantom Lords, are the strongest mage guild. Since that's how it is, then die. Makarov's fist instantly grew larger, and then he slammed it towards Jose. The force was so powerful it seemed capable of shattering a mountain. Such an attack can't hurt me. Facing Makarov's powerful punch, capable of knocking out an S-rank mage, Joseph sneered and actually condensed his almost tangible magical energy into a fist to meet the punch head-on. Makarov wasn't surprised that Joseph could block his attack. He knew Joseph's strength very well. Let's fight up there, if you don't want your guild to be completely destroyed. With that, he punched through the guild's roof and then used his powerful magical energy to levitate above the guild. At their level, even without learning flight magic, levitation using magical energy wasn't a problem. However, Makarov didn't want to fight Joseph in the guild, not because he was worried about damaging Phantom Lord's guild. That was none of his business. He was worried that the power of their battle would be too great, and fighting on the second floor might affect the mages on the first floor. Joseph smiled strangely upon hearing this. He didn't refuse and also used his magical energy to levitate upwards. I knew you'd do this. He had already anticipated that Makarov would propose an aerial duel for the safety of the Fairy Tail mages below. Therefore, he had Arya hide an ambush above the guild beforehand. Boom! The two wizards ascended into the air to confront each other. Before they even began casting spells, the mere clash of magical energy caused a change in the weather above the city, with lightning and thunder constantly resounding. If an ordinary mage were standing nearby at this moment, the sheer magical suppression would likely render them immobile. Is this what a wizard of 10 is like? George below stared at the two guild leaders above, his heart filled with shock. He thought Urza was already strong, but the wizards of 10 were even more outrageous. Dark Beam, Joseph, skilled in dark death magic, launched the first attack. His powerful dark energy transforming into countless beams that struck Makarov directly. Light array, one after another, holy light magic arrays lit up, and equally terrifying light energy burst forth from them. Makarov's light magic was no less powerful than Joseph's dark death magic. Deathstorm, blast of light, dark death magic and light magic collided in the sky above the city, and even the aftershocks of the magic caused all the buildings below to tremble. All the city's residents were awakened from their sleep, and upon discovering that it seemed Fairy Tail and Phantom were fighting, they immediately fled out of the city. Chapter 148 Super Magic, I want to learn. So light magic is this powerful? George couldn't help but exclaim in amazement as he watched Makarov fight Joseph to a standstill using only light magic, without even using giant magic. Early stage light magic wasn't very powerful. Its defense was alright thanks to the 3 pillars, but its offensive capabilities were truly lacking. Therefore, he never used light magic for attacks. But today, seeing the light magic Makarov used, he realized it wasn't that light magic was weak, but rather that he hadn't mastered it, nor had he learned high-level offensive light magic. He felt that every light spell Makarov used was enough to shatter a 100-meter-high mountain. While George was marveling at a battle between the 10 wizard saints, the 3 elements and Urza's group also clashed. The battle in the sky was too intense to determine a winner immediately, but George felt Makarov had a high chance of winning because Makarov hadn't yet used his most proficient giant magic. Therefore, he temporarily focused his attention on the battle below. Urza, leading Natsu and Gray in the fight against Phantom Lord's 3 elements, estimated their chances of winning were slim, and he planned to intervene when the opportunity arose. He couldn't defeat an S-rank opponent head-on, but his extensive magical knowledge made him an exceptional support character. However, the subsequent battle made him feel that intervention wasn't necessary. These Phantom Lord S ranks seem a bit weak. He noticed that while Natsu and Gray, who weren't S rank, were being suppressed by the opposing S rank opponents, Usagi and Jovia, their strength wasn't one-sided, they were quite evenly matched. Urza's fight against Thor was even more unlike a battle between two different classes. Urza didn't even need to change her outfit, yet she forced Thor to rely on transforming into sand to dodge attacks. His rock attacks were easily dealt with by Urza, one-shotting each of them with her sword. However, Thor seemed to have read Urza's memories, creating the figures of a handsome blue-haired man and several children, throwing Urza into disarray. Even so, Thor only managed to maintain a stalemate and posed no real threat to Urza. Because the difficulty of the missions faced by S-rank mages has increased significantly, for everyone's safety, the Guildmaster is much stricter in his assessment of our guild's S-rank mages. Actually, with Natsu and Gray's strength, they could easily obtain the title of S-rank mage in other guilds. Seeing George's doubt, Mira Jane whispered in his ear. But don't tell them, the Guildmaster is afraid they'll become arrogant. No wonder, George immediately understood. He wondered why Makarov was so confident in defeating the Phantom Lord. It turned out they were about the same in terms of top-tier strength. Makarov's strength was higher than Joseph's. Natsu and Gray also had the strength of Phantom Lord S-rank mages, and Urza was worth several Phantom Lord S-rank mages. Of course, they could fight this guild war. Considering this, it's not wrong to say that Fairy Tail is the kingdom's #1 magic guild. After all, the guild also has two guilds whose strength is no less than Urza's, and may even be stronger. Lexus and Mistrigan. There was also Gildard's, whose strength was said to be close to that of the Guildmaster, and who was away on a century-long mission. Sure enough, the battle below ended in no time. Urza was the first to finish her fight. Her strong character allowed her to quickly break free from Thor's psychological attack and knock him unconscious with a single sword strike. Natsu and Gray then defeated their opponents almost simultaneously. However, at this moment, George felt a vague unease, because he was still wondering why the last elementalist hadn't appeared. Logically speaking, for such an important plan, the strongest elementalist shouldn't be absent. The children's battle is over, and it's time for mine turn to kneel down and beg for mercy, Joseph. I'll count to 3, this is your last chance. In the sky, Makarov noticed that the battle below had ended, stopped attacking, and spoke to Joseph from his high vantage point. He actually had the ability to instantly kill Joseph from the beginning, but he had delayed until now to allow the children to practice in this guild war. You must know, such opportunities for training are rare. What? Makarov, what nonsense are you spouting? My strength is on par with yours, and I'm even far more ruthless than you. You dare ask me to kneel? You're the one who should be kneeling. Joseph, enraged by Makarov's words, laughed coldly, his magical power surging. Soul Devour, this was his strongest dark magic, capable of creating 2 enormous black phantoms to devour the souls of their enemies. 1, 2, 3, after counting to 3, seeing that Joseph still refused to surrender, Makarov clasped his hands together, and a massive light magic circle, large enough to cover the entire city, appeared above his head. Before the magic even activated, the 2 giant black phantoms Joseph created were instantly purified by the terrifying light magic surrounding Makarov. Holy crap, what kind of magic is that? George, who had been watching the battle, couldn't help but curse when he saw the light magic circle covering the entire city. Not only was he shocked, but Natsu, Gray, and all the Fairy Tail mages in the first floor hall were also astonished. Clearly, they didn't know what kind of magic Makarov was using. At this moment, Mira Jane smiled and explained, this is the Guildmaster's strongest magic, created by the first Guildmaster. It uses holy light to combat darkness. The caster only eliminates target's deemed enemies. It can be called a legendary, unique super magic, fairy law, light-based super magic, fairy law. I want to learn it. George was now very glad that he had prioritized learning light magic and already had a good foundation in it. He knew that there must be a reason why Guildmaster Makarov minored in light magic. Sure enough, it was to inherit the light-based super magic created by the first Guildmaster. Guildmaster, be careful. However, just as everyone was marveling at the light-based super magic that Makarov was about to cast, a burly man in green clothes, blindfolded and crying incessantly, suddenly appeared behind him. So sad, Finally there's an opening, void annihilation. He clasped his hands together, and a unique magic circle lit up. Makarov, who was casting fairy law, immediately changed his expression. The magic power in his body rapidly dissipated, and the light magic circle that had just formed in the sky also disappeared. Damn it, I was careless. He hadn't expected that a mage would be lurking nearby and launching a sneak attack while he was fighting Joseph. If it weren't for his last-minute lapse in concentration, a mage of that level wouldn't have been able to withstand a single punch from him. Kill him, Joseph, who had almost wet himself in fear from the fairy law, screamed as soon as Arya's sneak attack succeeded. Makarov's unreleased magic was too terrifying. He absolutely couldn't be allowed to leave here alive. Chapter 149 Fighting for S rank. Yes, Master. Upon hearing the Master's order, Arya immediately launched a deadly attack on Makarov, whose consciousness had been blurred due to the draining of his magic power. Death Void, 0, a space that seemed capable of devouring everything formed, attempting to shred Makarov to pieces on the spot. However, at that moment, a golden figure flashed by, swiftly pulling Makarov out of the attack range of the devouring space. It was George who, upon discovering Arya's appearance, had already used flight magic to rush up, saving Master Makarov's life at this critical moment. How dare you cause trouble, you're courting death? Seeing that Makarov was not dead, Joseph immediately flew into a rage, unleashing dark magic to kill George. Just then, 3 figures arrived beside him. Transformation, black feather armor, roar of the fire dragon, ice form, ice cannon, fairy tale's strongest team assembled, working together to stop Joseph. After rescuing Makarov, George immediately flew downwards, handing him over to Mira Jane. Take the Guildmaster away and get everyone to retreat. Urza, Natsu, and Gray, though strong, are no match for Joseph, even though Joseph had already expended a lot of magic power in his battle with Makarov. So now they can only protect Makarov's retreat first, and deal with Phantom Lord again after Makarov recovers. Be careful of Arya, we must defeat him before he opens his eyes, otherwise his magic power will surge after he opens his eyes, and he will be very difficult to deal with. Mira Jane took the Guildmaster and, seeing Arya chasing after them, quickly told George what she knew about Arya. At this moment, no one but George could stop Arya. But Arya is the leader of the 4 elements, and although George defeated Gagiel, it was entirely due to his ability advantage. Don't let him open his eyes. George had an idea. Avada Kedavra, he drew his wand and turned around to cast a killing curse directly at Arya. Arya, who originally wanted to use his aura shield to defend, suddenly felt a chill and immediately dodged the attack. His S-rank mage intuition told him that if he had been hit by that wrist-thick green magical ray, he would have been severely injured, if not killed. Divine Sharpness. After casting the killing curse, George immediately followed up with the invisible and intangible Divine Sharpness curse. A transparent blade over a meter long swiftly slashed towards Arya, who had just dodged. If this attack had hit, it would have likely sliced Arya in 2 instantly. Arya truly lived up to her title as the leader of the 4 elements. Even without opening her eyes and unleashing her full power, the moment she felt the Divine Sharpness curse strike her, she immediately unleashed pure magical power, successfully neutralizing the attack. In the end, only a wound less than a centimeter deep remained on her stomach. However, due to the curse effect of the Divine Sharpness curse, the wound began to bleed continuously, making her reaction slightly sluggish. And just then, George cast his 3rd spell. An S-class mage isn't so easy to kill, so the first 2 attack spells were just a prelude, mainly intended to distract Arya. The real attack was the 3rd spell, which had no real power and was hard to be wary of. Close your eyes. That's right, it was the Eye Curse spell that wizards in the Harry Potter world specifically used to deal with dragons, and professors had also used against basilisks. This spell didn't cause any damage, it simply prevented the opponent from opening their eyes until the magic wore off, rendering them blind. In this way, Arya's full power couldn't be unleashed, giving him hope of continuing to stall for time. Otherwise, facing the leader of the 4 elements alone would be incredibly stressful. My eyes. Arya covered his eyes, quickly retreating to create distance, then looked at George with a very surprised tone. I never expected you, a cat, to possess such power besides repair magic. But you think sealing my eyes and preventing me from fully unleashing my magic is enough? Let me tell you a harsh truth, even with my eyes closed, I am still the strongest of the four elements. He usually wears eye bandages to suppress the astonishing magic power within him, which is also a form of cultivation. Although the opponent's magic prevents him from unleashing his full magic power, it doesn't affect his normal output. He usually fights with his eyes closed, relying on the air to sense his opponents. Let me deliver you from this world, you pitiful little kitty. He pushed his hands towards George, and magic circles appeared one after another, a dense barrage of air cannons bombarding George. Armor protection. George immediately waved his wand, casting the armor charm to protect himself. In other words, due to his wand, his armor charm's defensive power was far weaker than the three light elemental gods. But in this world, with a magical enhancement of a top-grade wand nearly 20 times, his armor charm's defense actually surpassed that of the three gods. Air cannons bombarded George's armored spell, causing its defenses to tremble, but it remained steadfast and unbroken. Damn, he's gone. When the air cannon attack ended, George looked back at Arya's location, only to find her vanished. His expression changed drastically. At the same time, Arya's triumphant voice rang out behind him. I'll let you taste the same pain as Makarov. It turned out Arya possessed invisibility magic. She had secretly flown behind George while launching the air cannon attack, and now she intended to use the same trick to dissipate the magic power within George. Void annihilation. Arya clasped her hands together, and a strange magic circle reappeared. Sorry, just kidding. The instant Arya's magic activated, the terrified expression on George's face vanished, and his body rapidly expanded into a 5-meter-tall giant cat, slapping Arya across the body. He possessed psychic abilities. As long as an enemy's mind wavered, he could detect it no matter how invisible they were. All that had just been a performance to lower Arya's guard. With the power of a panda amplified by giant magic, this single swipe of his paw sent Arya flying towards the guild below. While not fatal, it briefly left him in a state of mental blankness. Go. George wasn't finished. A dozen sharp blades instantly flew from his backpack, following closely behind Arya. With the body of an S-rank mage in this world, his attack would have some effect, but at most cause minor injuries, not fatal ones. Once Arya recovered and was on guard, George would be the one to lose. So, strike while the iron is hot. The sharp blades caught up with Arya, slashing at his neck before he could even react. Finally, before Arya even hit the ground, his head and body were separated. He died at George's hands. Chapter 150 Fierce Fire. This is what happens when you sneak up on and harm our leader, George shouted with a megaphone spell the moment Arya's body hit the ground. The entire arena was shocked. Superpowers are essentially a minor bug for mages. Because they're not part of the same system, they're much harder to detect when activated. Normal magic, no matter how well concealed, inevitably produces magical fluctuations, making it easy for top mages to detect it beforehand. Even magic from different worlds belongs to the same magical system and shares some similarities. But magnetic control is a superpower. Its effects don't produce any magical fluctuations and are therefore undetectable. If George had used a killing curse or a divine strike curse for his final attack, he might not have killed Arya. Even if his mind went blank, his instincts would have triggered a burst of magical power to defend against the magical fluctuations. George, he actually defeated Arya, the leader of the four elements, the fairy tale mages, led by Mara Jane, who had just withdrawn from the Phantom Mage Guild, were astonished to see George actually defeat Arya, the leader of the four elements, in a one-on-one fight. He said he wasn't strong, that defeating Gadgil was purely luck, but now he's even defeated Arya, it can't be luck, right? George is just too modest. Now Fairy Tail will have another S-class mage. Good job, George. He avenged the guild master. That's so satisfying. If they had to pinpoint who they hated most just now, it wouldn't be Joseph from Phantom Mage, but Arya, who had ambushed their guild master and left him on the brink of death. Watching George fight Arya was incredibly satisfying and cathartic. However, despite the satisfaction, they continued their retreat under Mara Jane's command. Although George had killed Arya, Urza, Natsu, and Grey were struggling to hold out against Joseph. As one of the 10 wizard saints, Joseph was simply too powerful. Even with Urza being a top-tier S-class mage, and with the assistance of Natsu and Grey, whose true strength was also S-class, they were no match. After this long struggle, all three were covered in wounds, and Urza's black feather armor was mostly shattered. This is tough. After dealing with Arya, George turned and saw the situation of Urza and the other two, his brow furrowing. Even if he joined them to stop Joseph, it would be a drop in the ocean. They were simply not on the same level. Especially since Joseph's main magic was dark and death magic, even if his killing curse hit, it might not be enough to kill him. Other magic and superpowers would probably be questionable, even if they could penetrate the thick layer of magical defense on Joseph's body. He saw his powerful sword strike aimed at Joseph, yet it was directly blocked by Joseph's arm, which was formed from dark magic. Looks like this is the only option. In this situation, if they wanted to retreat safely while Joseph was blocking their way, they had to use their most powerful magic. Although he couldn't control this magic at full power, as long as he could stop Joseph and allow them to retreat successfully, he would have achieved his goal. Fierce Sapphire, magic power was unleashed wildly without any control. With a special enhancement of the superior magic wand on spells, especially fire spells, an extremely large blue fire dragon took shape and roared as it pounced towards Joseph. "Get out of the way!" Hearing George's shout and seeing the huge blue fire dragon, Urza quickly flapped her wings and pulled the battered Natsu and Grey back to George's side. Joseph, on the other hand, showed a furious expression upon seeing this. Killed by a cat? They're all trash. The Phantom Lord's ace mage was captured, 2 elementalists were defeated by a fairy tale mage who wasn't even S rank, and the leader of the 4 elementalists died at the hands of a fairy tale cat. It was an utter disgrace. He himself had almost wet himself from fear by Makarov's magic, only to be held back by 3 fairy tale mages. Today, all the fairy tale mages had to die to preserve Phantom Lord's reputation. Soul Devour, exhausting a large amount of magic power, he unleashed the strongest spell he used in his battle with Makarov. 2 giant black phantoms capable of devouring souls appeared, opening their mouths to suck in the incoming blue dragon. His black phantoms could directly devour this kind of fire-shaped magic. Unfortunately, George wasn't using the fire-shaped magic of this world, but rather a cursed and somewhat sentient fiend fire. Faced with the black phantoms devouring, the blue fiend fire dragon was enraged, roaring again and biting down fiercely. The moment the blue fiend fire and the black phantom made contact, the phantom let out a piercing scream. The 2 powerful energies were locked in a stalemate, unable to gain the upper hand for a moment. The collision of the massive dark energy and the blue flames even ignited the guild below. The phantom mages in the guild were terrified and immediately fled. How is this possible? Joseph looked incredulous that his black phantom was entangled by the blue flames. He couldn't believe that a mere cat's fire magic could be so powerful. Good job, George. Let's take this opportunity to go up and kill that guy and avenge the guildmaster. Seeing Joseph entangled by the blue fire dragon, Natsu immediately perked up again, wanting to take the opportunity to go up and cooperate with the fire dragon to kill Joseph directly. However, George rejected his idea. What are you fighting for? Let's retreat quickly. I can't control that fire dragon. If we go, we'll be attacked too. Let's go back and save the guildmaster first, and then we can make plans. The fiend fire dragon's attacks were indiscriminate, making it impossible to coordinate a fight to defeat Joseph. Otherwise, if they went in and ganged up on them now, they might actually have a chance of winning. Listen to George. Urza kicked Natsu's butt, then grabbed Natsu and Grey and followed George to chase after the retreating fairy tale force. Based on these battles, she found that George's judgment had always been accurate. After George and the others completely disappeared, Jose finally managed to forcibly neutralize the blue fire dragon with his powerful dark magic. This blue fire dragon was too strange, even the awakened Jovia couldn't extinguish it with water magic, and could only rely on magic to forcibly neutralize it. Gather all the mages from all branches, activate the mobile fortress, we're going to Fairy Tale's lair. Jose, enveloped in black magic, muttered angrily, none of you will escape. Makarov had to be killed, otherwise, if he regained his magic power, he didn't want to experience that terrifying light-based super magic again. But Guildmaster, now that Arya is dead, the Jupiter cannon probably won't be able to activate. Thor, his face bruised and swollen from Urza's beating, said. The most powerful part of the moving fortress was the Jupiter cannon, based on the magic power of the 4 elementalists, capable of absorbing external magic power to unleash a super powerful attack, surpassing even the 10 wizard saints. But now that only 3 elementalists are still alive, it's practically useless. Idiot, don't you know how to improve it? Let Gadgil take over. The power will be slightly less, but not by much. The fairy tale mages retreated too hastily. George was fighting Arya, Mira Jane and the others were protecting the magic-depleted Makarov. so Gadget was naturally left unattended. I'm going to grind until the end of the month. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.